'Cause it just, on a very basic level, one of the most common things you see when, at least I see when it comes to racism is, and this is in real estate, this is just everywhere, is, oh, they did something bad over there too, and they didn't fix it, so why should we have to fix it? Like, everybody's messed up. And you
Yes.
call false equivalence to stuff. Oh, the Holocaust happened and they're okay. Or the Japanese internment camps happened and they're okay. That's not the same as 400 years of slavery.
They're all different.
Yeah. So, and when those two things specifically, people were compensated for that. There were Japanese people that got millions of dollars.
Yeah.
There are whole museums that are dedicated to how bad Hitler was. And they acknowledge that all over the country. And all of the people agree that Hitler was a bad person.
Yeah.
No Jewish person has ever had to walk into a courthouse with a statue of Hitler in front of it. There are statues of Confederate people all over the South. There are courthouses named after them. There are army bases named after them. We've had presidents and there's no, when you say that, they're like, oh, well, that's not really. It's like every bank that's here now benefited from slavery. All of the Ivy League schools owned its own slave. So there's very little interest in that. And because the African Americans here in the United States have no one to go to the United Nations or go to these places and say, hey, they need to be compensated for that. When these other nationalities have that is used as leverage in a place. So we're here to be American to be Black and American is to be American without rights, but Black without history. I can't go and say, well, here's where my parents are from, and here where my grandparents are from, and here's where my great-grandparents are from, and here's where my great-grandparents are from. I can't do that. My history starts on a slave block in Virginia, probably. So
I'm adopted, right? So, and I'm very fortunate that I got adopted into a upper middle class family, but I'm from a trailer. And I always ask myself, would I be the same person today if that thing had not happened? And the obvious answer is absolutely. I would be a totally different person. The different opportunities, because I would have been impoverished versus being not. Then this book. And then it makes me ask a lot of questions. And then I'm 39 years old.
We go with 29.
Yeah, I'm 39 years old, and I am not in control of my past. Or of the people who were here before me, but I am benefiting in somehow, some way because of the color of my skin. And apparently, and I say apparently because this is something that my business partner and I were getting, not into an argument, but into a discussion about, like, I think America is one of the greatest places in the world because it seems to me that you could come in from anywhere, no matter your skin color or whatever, and make it here. And so that's not to say that there aren't things that will hold you back or have held people back. But his dad, for example, came here from Haiti and didn't have a lot of education and schooling and has become a middle class or maybe upper middle class. I don't know what you would consider him to be. But he owns property, which is the greatest thing that I think that you can do in the United States.
Yep.
And so, but then we were applying for loans, and he got a loan. He ended up getting a house. I was applying for a loan. We were trying to figure out if there were real differences. And I don't think that there are, but then there's this book, right? And so, and I know that's not necessarily what you,
I have another one where if we talk about loans and stuff that goes into way more detail specifically to that.
Okay.
Than that book called the Whiteness of Wealth. And it talks about how there's racism intrinsic to the tax code because of the way it benefits, and I'm grossly oversimplifying this. When the tax code was written, when the tax code was written, Black people weren't considered people. We were considered property. So setting that aside.
Okay.
If we fast
This
forward,
current today, still
Yes.
those same things are holding
Yes.
to be true.
So-
Okay.
if it was designed behind benefiting a husband and wife, when a wife is a stay-at-home mother and the husband, the married file jointly tax code, and I'm speaking this as a layman, not as a tax person.
Copy
That's
that.
why I got to give you the book. But it's designed to benefit a husband who makes a whole lot of money, a wife who doesn't make much money, if at all. And when they come together, they pay a lower tax rate based on that. But if the husband and wife make the same amount of money, or even the wife makes a little bit of more money, they actually end up paying more in taxes.
Okay.
So, and
And-
that's just just one small piece of that stuff. But when you're the compounding effect of there has to be some sort of adjustment that says, hey, we both can work really, really hard, and hard work can get you things. That is a fundamental truth. I agree that I'm living proofs of hard work and God, because 80% of what I've done, it wasn't a result of my hard work. It was a result of people giving me opportunities in spaces where there was no one else that looked like me. So and then I had to be comfortable in those spaces when people tried me.
Right.
When people said things that if I responded in the way that they would respond to me, the police get called on me. The police don't get called on you in those spaces.
So,
And they know that. So they're, hey, I'm just going to sort of poke you to see. So I got to put my hands in my pockets and enjoy the happy hour. I can't karate chop you in the throat because you're making weird references to old Martin episodes that are not funny. They're racist.
got it.
And that type of stuff, when you sort of layer those layers onto somewhere like South Florida, or a lot, you see this in California, very, very heavily, you see it in New York, very heavily immigrant communities. There are fractures that happen there that people sort of jump over. And what I mean by the example that I've seen, that I watched my grandfather and other people here in South Florida live through, is when the Mariel boat lift happened from Cuba, when all or when a lot of the Haitian diaspora starts to come in, and they ate up all of the jobs in Miami Beach. That whole service sector almost overnight became Hispanic workers. But before, those are all African-American workers. So now those other minorities who came, who are working for even lower wages than the African-Americans were working for before, and they came into communities that were primarily African-American communities. So you're adding a level of competition there. And then I've heard, I don't know this, I've heard white Cubans argue with dark-skinned Cubans. So if you can pass as a white person, kind of like being a Republican in Hialeah, but if you go to if you go to Georgia, if you go to Mecca, I thought people all the time, if you go to Macon, they're not going to say, are you Cuban? Are you Brazilian? Are you Argentine? You're a Mexican. The level of racism in these less diverse places then makes all types of other issues, they all get convoluted. So then when I say,
Right.
well, I just want to be able to get a house that has the same equity that the kid whose parents bought his house in Miami Shores, when my grandfather bought his house in Richmond Heights, that house has put 3 generations through college. It's been refinanced. It's doing the house in Richmond Heights because of zoning and,
Okay. And
it's a lot, but it's
yeah. But then my question to that, right? Like the zoning or could I think the saying is time heals all wounds. And I like to think of America as getting better consistently and continuously with time. And now I'm not saying it moves fast. I definitely know
well,
it
the arc
doesn't.
of history bends toward justice. Yeah, we get that. But
So part of this is ignorance because I didn't grow up in the same time period that you did. But
with diversity. So if Congress and the presidency and the chiefs of police and the district attorneys and the doctors and the owners of the hospitals and the teachers at the schools all still look the same demographically the way they looked in 1950. How does that change? The vast majority of Congress is still white and male. All the presidents have been white and male. The most governors are white and male. So how does the judgment of those people change when they fundamentally don't believe real estate, luxury real estate agents are less than 1%. So it's not, in order for those things to change, the structures have to fundamentally change. And usually what I believe happens is you have well-meaning people. So Black people, white people, there are people who want to change things. And those people at some point start to make progress. And then it's complicated by minorities who have assimilated outside of minority culture. That's how someone becomes very, very successful and then thinks that affirmative action shouldn't exist when they're a product of affirmative action. Okay, I'm here because somebody had to check a box and say, we want some Black people here. Okay. That may not be in my literal experience, but I've been places where I knew I was the token Black. We got to have somebody. We need some color here. Okay. So that happens at an institutional level. It happens at a social level. And when someone says, hey, well, how do we get more people here? Because they don't want that value. So then they have to cluster in places. But so that's a very slow way to do it. And then the people who achieve those things become outsiders because you don't fit in. You don't always fit in where you came from. You don't fit in where you're going. So you're stuck in this neither world of I'm successful, but where am I? How do I do this? And that's a very awkward place to be when you can't find your footing. And as I see this all the time in successful people, not just in real estate. Okay, well, I want to go over here, but there are people who make this transition, and they make that transition, and their mentors are old white guys. And those old white guys, even when they're very well-meaning white guys, they don't know. So if I teach you how to go out and find good deals, you will gentrify the shit out of Opelika. Because it's low deals, I buy low, sell high. Buy low, sell high. Right. And that's all you care about. You don't care about there are people here, there's character, there's culture, I don't care about that. I just want to get a good deal. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I'm an artist, so I've been through this because the places that I started became gentrified where I could no longer afford.
Wynwood. That's what
Wynwood is a perfect example.
So, but the way you manage gentrification, as someone who sold hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate, I don't believe you can stop gentrification. I don't think that's possible. I think that's an unrealistic expectation. I think managing gentrification requires you to engage the people who live in the community and have meaningful cultural, emotional connections to that community, because there are people who would have bought condos, houses in Overtown, in Wynwood, that would buy right here on Sistrum if they knew those properties were for sale. And they have connections here, so they come back. So those people being here keeps the character and culture of the community. So it's not a question of pushing everybody out. I used to work with a young lady who I think she bought a place somewhere downtown. I won't say her name because she'll be very mad if I do.
Okay, don't. Yeah, you can tell me later.
Yeah, but she's super cool and she's wonderful. She does all types of stuff. She's white, but she's amazing, super genuine. She's changed my life. She's introduced me to some amazing folks. And when she bought the house, she said, I bought this house. I've been doing all this renovation, and she's very earthy, right? She walks a lot. She walks to the grocery store. She's been to all types of trips to Haiti and South America, all types of stuff. Some mission trips, some just traveling, been all over Great Wall of China, all types of crazy shit. She said, but the kids in the neighborhood just sit on the porch and stare at me. They won't talk to me. It was a Black community. Like they just look, they wave, and they just stare. And I'm here. Like I walk, I do all the time. I walk my dog. I'm in the yard playing. And I said to where they don't trust you because you're pushed. They see you coming as them having to get pushed out of that. They don't see you as, oh, because the opposite happens when I get listings in communities like that. When I've had listings where we did renovations or stuff like that, little kids will walk up to me, hey man, what are y'all doing there? What's going on? When we used to build houses using shipping containers, kids used to stop by. There'd be the owners of the company would be on site all day. And there'd be all types of people doing all this work. And they just sit on the porch and look. But as soon as I got there, they hop on, hey, what's going on over here?
Oh, you're saying that the wall is the color of the skin.
Well,
isn't that just tribalism?
It's history repeating itself. So how do I know that you're not? That's, scary animals, evolution.
Right.
The scary animals live the longest because they stay away from all the scary stuff. The curious animals are the ones that the gator gets.
Yeah.
So some of that, and you're right. But it's not, it's evidence-based. Well, we know what happens when they show up. We get pushed out. They complain about the music. When we have graduation parties, now you don't know what Goombe is. So now you're complaining about a culturally significant celebration. So there's a lot. It's not really simple to you say, well, A equals B. It's if we want to manage gentrification, her moving in isn't the problem. Because if I move in next door and we're in the same tax bracket, then when the kids come talk to me and I say, oh man, it's cool. Kim's not there, but Kim's cool. Then they'll go talk to Kim. But when there's and they don't have to know me. I look similar when I move in luxury spaces. And the history here is that there's not enough evidence for most people, not for all people. There's not enough evidence for someone in certain communities to just trust you for the sake of trusting you. That's Black communities and the police. If the police show up, I'm 45 years old. I've lived in Florida off and on my entire life. I have never had a good experience with the police when I called. When I called, and I live in a $500,000 condo.
Neither.
But how likely are you to get killed versus me? I'm four times likely to get shot.
Yeah.
So there's so much wrapped up in that.
Look, I can't say that television didn't make me at least see that. And that's the other thing is like, I'm wondering how much of this has been drilled into me through like just media, like cops on television growing up. Right. And so, or the news, and then like knowing that things are being placed in me subconsciously without putting them in front of me is changing a piece of my bias, which is also like the thing. Like I don't know what's true and not true. And then I also know that history is created by the people who win. Yeah. And so, and then growing up, rap was the fucking coolest.
Yeah. But my data points, and I try very hard to stick to this. That's why I keep copies of the color law in my car. Is I'm not telling you what somebody told me. Right. I'm telling you my life. I'm telling you the people I know. I've lived in a dozen different places, little towns, big house, little house, expensive car, cheap car. Now, I'm riding around in my grandfather's car right now. I was driving a Maserati a couple days. When I interact with the police, it's problematic. Yeah. That's been the universal truth. Yeah. When I used to, my old office in Aventura, they would follow me to my car, to the $100,000 BMW. They'd see me get out of the car and then stop me between my car and the office door. Hey, what you doing here? But you just saw me get out of the. That's so it's really, you have to be, when you move in, and I work on this a lot because you want to be able to say, well, all white people aren't bad. All cops aren't bad. We know this.
Right. Yeah. It's obvious.
It's a gamble that then can cost me my life or my freedom if I give you more of a benefit of a doubt than I have to. And that's, if we get into an argument right now and your business partner calls the police, cop's not going to ask me what happened. He's going to walk in here and he's going to ask you what happened. And then whatever you say is where the narrative starts. Even if I call the police, he's still going to show up.
I'm like, because my name's on the building.
But he doesn't know, because he doesn't know your name.
See, but I haven't had this experience. I'm going to not use names. I had a recent experience with the police. I called the cops, and I'm calling to help somebody else who is in a bad situation. And I'm in there with them, and they start questioning, how did you?
Yep.
And I'm like, I'm literally trying to help.
Yeah. I'm the guy who called you.
Yeah. And I don't think I love the police and I hate the police because they're not there to help you no matter what. Even me, they're not there to help me. They're there to ask questions, to be able to provide evidence that can later be used against you in the court of law.
They're there to arrest somebody, or they're there because they got bullied and they want to execute. They want to flex power.
A lot of the times, but then at the same time, like I've had crackheads down the street, and like I really don't want to be the person that's handling that person.
I think.
So anyway,
I know we're going a lot of different directions, but I think the law enforcement in many ways has the same problem that education has. Okay. And I come from a long line of teachers. I sell expensive real estate because teachers don't make enough money. I'm familiar, but I think law enforcement recruits. They recruit warm bodies, not good cops. I've had interactions with police that I know for certain are incredibly racist.
Okay.
But they are also good cops.
Okay.
Why? Because they showed up to a place, and most of this happened in Atlanta, which is a very black city, even though it has a whole bunch of white police, especially in the suburbs. But these police were used to dealing with black people. They know the mannerisms of just somebody that's frustrated and angry and loud, and you are clearly not a threat. You're just angry. And I would rather shoot you, but I can't because I have my uniform on. So I just need to de-escalate this. Make sure nobody goes to jail. Listen, man, you got to calm down. Okay, yeah, I get all that. I've dealt with those types of police officers who clearly were very irritated. I don't want to do any paperwork behind this. We've all heard those stories. I just want to go home. My shift is almost over. So please just chill out. Those guys, they're not scary. They understand how to do their job. They have the appropriate personality to be able to operate very calmly in high stress situations to de-escalate. And if they gotta arrest somebody, Alternatively, there are a significant number of law enforcement people that are scary on a very fundamental level. I'm scared. I show up and I'm ready to shoot something. I'm scared.
They're scared.
When you're aggressive and you're moving, even if you're just angry and you're very animated, I'm going to tell you to stop moving. And if you don't stop moving, I'm going to shoot you. Right. If you're high, if you have mental illness, we see this in Fort Lauderdale all the time. And that's a recruiting issue. That's not, so layering on, like racism in policing is a whole nother, the FBI allots for the fact that they know that most police precincts have been infiltrated by the Ku Klux Klan. There's documentation on that.
Okay.
So they know that the racism is there. So I sort of set that aside. The bigger issue when we talk about law enforcement is just how do you change behavior? Okay. You can't make them not be racist. You can make them not shoot people by holding them accountable when they do shoot people. But if I know I'm just going to get some time off, internal investigation, and I'll be back at work in 2 months, then what incentive do I have not to shoot people?
Right.
And then people will call me a hero. I'm a patriot, and because I shot a random black kid who we said was doing X, Y, Z, or a random guy. Period. Like there's tons of I know we're in a lot of places, but there's.
Yeah. Well, I brought it here, so my bad.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. But it's there's a lot of stuff.
It all stems from color. So,
or the lack of address on a very fundamental level. There have been no meaningful structural changes to address the disparity of the baseline of Americans, immigrants, Europeans, whatever you want to call them, and freed and formerly enslaved people. Okay, the 1619 Project, Juneteenth happens, Black people are free. They don't get anything. A very small number of them get the 40 acres at the same time. Yes.
Right? Yeah.
But that, like, a very small number of them got that because it stopped after Lincoln got assassinated, all these other. But at the same time, millions of acres were being given away to all types of immigrants that were coming. And many of those millions of acres are still in those families all over the Midwest. Right. So a slave becomes free to go where? Because he owns no land. So now he's a sharecropper because he has to stay because he has no land. He has nowhere to go. And the person who owns the land ends up owning cities because you got to stay here. Now you're a sharecropper,
right?
Because you need somewhere to stay.
Isn't that like serfs?
Yeah.
Serfs. Yes, that's the right word, right?
Yeah, but serfs didn't have to do it for 100 years. Like
previous is what you're saying.
So,
yeah.
But the foundation of that. So the whole country is built. Okay, well, we're here. We've been here for 400 years, for 200 years, however many hundred. And now you're all free to do what? So we don't. So the equity of that land, when you hear these people who look back on their generations of wealth, the plantation, we have a city called plantation. Like so where does that wealth go? If I've been here and at no point in time.
But I looked up plantation and it was never a plantation.
No, it was a sugarcane plantation.
It was a sugarcane plantation?
Yeah. There's another book, A Bubble in the Sun. Yeah, but the company that you saw, it's sugarcane. It was.
I thought they were just fruit farms, and there was
a sugarcane. So that's where it was named after a company because I don't know if it was the whole city plantation, but there's
that is the background of it.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's a sugarcane. Okay, so that's what the disconnect. I believe in a lot of ways is that. So if you, and I'm oversimplifying here, but if you say Japanese internment camps, compensation. Holocaust, compensation. Slavery,
no compensation.
If I come to your house, right? Let's say Chris has $1 million in the safe somewhere.
Sure.
I find out you got $1 million in the safe. Come to the house, I steal that $1 million.
Uh-huh.
You don't know it was me.
Uh-huh.
Take that $1 million and I put my kids through college.
Uh-huh.
They go out, get these wonderful educations. I buy life insurance.
Uh-huh.
So then when I die,
uh-huh.
I pay off my house, pay off an apartment building. My son graduates from an Ivy League school. He becomes a Fortune 100 president, making $1 billion a year, hanging out with Elon Musk. When after I die, it's discovered that my family is now worth $500 million. And I stole $1 million from you.
The original million.
Do my kids owe you something?
Do my kids owe you something now that you're worth $1 billion?
I'm dead.
No, I get it. All right. So then, and this is where it becomes difficult because unless you're doing 23andMe and you know who.
Because my kids will say, no, I didn't take that money from you. My dad's not here.
Like for me, someone who, I don't think I have in any way a background or a history of being involved in slavery, except for the fact that I was born in Biloxi, Mississippi. So not really likely, but I'm adopted, so don't entirely know the whole story. Was I trying to go with this? Oh, I'm trying to go with this is I'm trying to understand where am I supposed to pay taxes for something that, and I understand the idea of it, but I'm also trying to understand money more these days and how it will affect me. So the actions of people who I don't know I was involved with in my past did something incredibly horrible that had
lasting
effects. And I'm aware how effects happen. So,
And it was government sanctioned.
And then it was government sanctioned. Oh my God, that was the other part of this book, though.
So it's not just you being bad, and
then it extends it for even longer.
Because the government, whether you liked it or not, was taking your money and facilitating this. Right. So it's not about what you want to do with your tax dollars. Tax dollars made sure that Black people and white people couldn't live in the same place.
In communities. And I was under the impression that it's because of classism, not because of...
I would argue that very little of it. Now there's more classism.
Okay. Well, maybe that's where I'm getting it from now. Because as I want to get better and improve myself, I'm constantly trying to evolve myself with people who have done better.
Yeah.
Perfect example of people who have done better in real estate in particular. And you are right. There are not a lot of Black people involved in the upper tier, although I will say I've gotten to work with all the ones who have.
Yeah.
But if there's a ratio, it's definitely out skewed. But is there not history?
Exactly. That's the compensation piece.
Right. And then how do we compensate?
But you have to agree that there needs to be compensation first.
Right.
And that's the rub is, well, I didn't steal your money. That's what my son would say. Well, I didn't steal your money. My dad stole your money. And your money is gone. He didn't give it to me. He bought a life insurance policy. He paid for my education. You can't take my education. You want me to give my degree to you?
Right.
So then on a fundamental level, the basic argument is, are my kids responsible for evil I perpetrate? So if that's true, then that's where reparations come from.
So I have an idea. We should start a Bitcoin ETF. It should just be for the Black community. I don't know who's in charge of it. I think you could use Cardano or something to do self-governance. And how
does that hold the government accountable for what's been done so far?
Well, it would begin the process for fixing. What I mean is, it would supply enough money to be able to continue to apply money forever. And the reason that's my idea. I don't know if this is going to work.
So where does the money come from?
From taxes. I think that you tax it, you turn it into Bitcoin or an ETF
and
or
then
something.
Who gets it?
I think that you would need to qualify. Now, this one's going to suck because in order to qualify, you need to have a DNA test that proves that you're African American.
Yeah. Well, and that's where there's a whole conversation about reparations, and I'm happy to send you some stuff, put in show notes or whatever, because it goes in a bunch of different directions. There are all types of people doing studies on that very question: is, well, how do you
solve the problem?
How do you solve the problem? But part of solving the problem is, well, what's the number? Right? It
could be unlimited.
It could, but in order to solve it, as a Black, well, how much does Nate get? How does my son get? How do we quantify how much Black you are? So if your dad your great great grandfather was a slave owner, and your great great grandmother was a slave, so now they were half Black. They were really all Black. So it gets really so it's.
This is where time fixes all wounds.
Yeah, well, theoretically,
except
if everything
legal stuff
exactly
that goes back,
if we could just go back and say, hey, well, this land was taken, we'll just give you some land. Like there are very practical terms here, but when I heard a quote years ago,
could you give them the value of the land in U.S. dollars and give the land back to then who are the people that qualify for it again?
And who's in a Congress with 85% white males, who's going to sign off on that? When someone has been privileged their whole life, equality feels like discrimination. So if you've always been at the front of the line, if you've always had the best of the best, when I say, well, hey, man, we got to share that. You're like, no, that's discrimination. You're taking away from.
Right.
That's what gives people a skewed version to say, hey, well, when you hear about the affirmative action stuff in colleges.
Yes, I just heard about it. But
that's in my view, that is a very easy way to perpetuate everything you see everywhere else. Why does Goldman Sachs look like Yale? Why? Because a bunch of white guys graduated with a bunch of white guys, and you have other cultures who, with Asian or Indian or whatever who come in and they just drill into their kids, you got to be smart, 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 you got to be smart.
Right.
And okay, well, they'll come in and they then jump to the front line because they have incredible IQs and their whole ethos is you just got to be smart. You got to be smart. And I'm going to go work and put all this money to put you through college. Well, when my grandparents were working, they were just doing that to live. So that's why the disproportionate number of student loans in African American, there's okay, well, I don't have enough money to put you through college. I just got enough money to get you out of high school.
Right.
So well, you can't mortgage your house? Well, no, because my house isn't worth much because there's a laundromat next door and a liquor store around the corner. But if we were in Miami Garden, if we were in Miami Shores, we're in Miami Beach, of course I could mortgage it for you and your sister and your brother. So it becomes it's a very...
And then like where they put shopping centers or grocery stores or corner stores instead.
And then what they zone, like there's a lot of... So it just gets wrapped up into a lot of stuff.
So is there, since you're in real estate, is there any place that's trying, I assumed that Atlanta was the place. That's me not knowing anything except for
that there are a whole bunch of Black people.
that is where people of color went to be able to.
And that's true. There have been wealthy Black people in Atlanta for the last 100 years, at least. That does not change the fact that while...
Well, that's just one place.
Yeah, that and Black people overwhelmingly have influence in government, business environment in Atlanta is still overwhelmingly white. Coca-Cola, Home Depot, UPS, like there are all these big companies. Like in most cities, in most places, politics is politics, but politics is controlled by government. I mean, politics is controlled by business because business owners buy politicians. So there's a level of equality there. You have people like Maynard Jackson, who was the mayor
But the businesses are Black owned, right?
Many of them are, not all of them. That's like saying Hialeah, all the businesses are owned.
And then I'll say this, which I could be wrong on, voting.
Yeah.
So if there's a majority of people who are...
And Atlanta has had a Black mayor for the last 100 years. So, or a very long time. So there's a level of influence. I'm not discarding.
Well, no, I'm trying to use it as like what I would say is maybe the ideal or base for like what we could hope to build.
No, because then you just need a whole bunch of Black people there. Atlanta is Atlanta because you have a large number of African Americans in one place. So what you're telling me is that as a Black person who likes the beach, I don't get to have diversity because if I move to Sunny Isles...
What I'm saying is why can't we do that here?
Well, that's the goal.
Okay.
You could, but you have to be able to get the people here. And when you want to tell people that Black people benefited from slavery, you don't really get that many Black people that want to move here. So when
why not one more time?
So
why don't
Ron DeSantis
just
changed the most recent approval of the African American Histories program.
Yes.
To include verbiage that says that African Americans gained skills from slavery. We benefited from slavery, which is the equivalent of saying that Jewish people gained skills from the Holocaust.
No, but we gained knowledge from the Holocaust.
Did you learn how to hold your breath really long?
This is very controversial. What is about to be coming out of my mouth, but like, all right, the part of the reason that we know what temperature the body freezes at, hypothermia, all these
Jewish people learned those things, and that's a good thing.
Oh man, so like,
would you say that to someone who lost their grandparents?
I'm Jewish, so I'm involved in this, but again, I'm not. I'm adopted.
So we're not talking about science.
Right.
We're talking about in practical terms, saying, and if you lay on top of that, you're saying, hey, we did really bad things to you.
Right.
Here's compensation for all those bad things. Because now we're going to do, because modern gynecology happened as a result of a doctor who practiced on slaves with no anesthesia.
Right.
There are doctors today that take surveys and say they believe that Black people have a higher pain threshold than white people. Black women are more likely to die during childbirth than anyone else. Like, so it's
so much.
It gets really big and goes in so many directions. And into today, these are recent surveys. This isn't like old stuff. It's very hard when all of these spaces are by and large, largely non-Black people.
Mm.
And if I have a hard time, I refuse to accept, and I love Atlanta. I became a man in Atlanta. I grew up there. But I'm not going to say, oh, well, I can't live on the beach, because if I want to live on the beach, I can't live around Black people. And I can't live around Black people over here because whenever Black people come here, the police harass us. Or because we can't get mortgages here. Or because people say, well, why are you here? Or the teachers treat my kids differently. Like, those are all things when I'm the only African American in a community. Now, when my daughter walks to the mailbox, everybody's Ring camera goes off and people are on next door saying, who's the Black girl walking to the mailbox? Like, it shouldn't be that way. So somebody has to, otherwise you're saying, okay, how do we, if you want that, if you want this culture, you want this acceptance, you got to go where there are other people like you, because that's the only place they're going to get politicians that care. And that to me is what creates, okay, well, none of the coastal cities have that. No, all you have these big metropolitan areas. So instead of just saying, hey, well, how about we just get people to be nice everywhere? Instead of, because that's the reverse of racism. Yeah. When we hear the people, go back to where you came from. I'm from here.
Right.
I don't have anywhere to go back to. And that is a plight that is unique to African Americans. I can't get my history. I can't trace it back. I can't go there. There's no documents anywhere that can tell where, other than DNA, which then can't even tell me who. Like, they can't, there's no rabbit hole for me to go down.
Yeah.
Because my great grandfather was property when he came here, and he didn't speak the language. So all of these other people, whiteness is a construct. It's not a real thing, because there's Irish and European and Russian. I'm Black because that is what my history is. I don't have any other place. So there's no one at the United Nations to advocate for me, because my country of origin is the country that oppresses me. So if you're from Nigeria, then Nigeria can put in a case to the United Nations. If you're from Haiti, if you're from Cuba, there's so much wrapped up into that. And then that gets more and more complicated when you add the diaspora. So of course there were more slaves in the Caribbean. There was a ton of slaves in South America. The United States didn't have the most slaves of that transatlantic slave trade. So that's not just understanding sort of the complexity of the problem, and then realizing how heavy the lift is to change it, and how little, if we're being really honest, how little motivation there is. That's what makes people move to Atlanta. That's what makes people move to DC, to Chicago, to Houston, because they're tired. I just want to be around a bunch of Black people and not have to feel the way I feel. If I come out of here right now, I was in Bow Harbor today. Mm-hmm. I have a $500,000 listing showing property. I walked out of the unit to go walk to the parking lot, to the side of the building, to see if the client that I was waiting for was there. There are a couple of police there because it was a speed trap there. Anybody who rides through Bow Harbor knows.
I know
over the bridge. Trap. So I'm not going to say where I was, because then it'll make people that build mad. But so I'm sitting there, and the cops are there on this side of the building. They're scanning people, pulling them over. There's a couple over here, and one of them sitting in the parking lot eating a sandwich or something crazy. I walked past his car to go to the corner to see. When I walked past him, I'm dressed as you see now. I'm wearing a $500 shirt, $200 sneakers that are white, by the way. They don't look like I've been running. I'm overweight. I'm not in robbing people's shape. So I walked past him, and he puts his car in reverse and begins to back down behind me. And because the driveway is a one-way driveway, I'm thinking, well, cops break laws. He's just going to back out and sort of pull off. So he backs out and he pulls onto the grass, like he's about to pull out, and I'm standing in the driveway when I look, so I move while I'm looking, and he just sits there. And then I realized, oh, he's watching me.
Oh.
So I turned around just for shits and giggles, and I walked back up to the entrance of the condo. And he pulls back up and stops in his parking spot. And then I walk back, and he puts the car back in reverse. And this time before he gets back, I turn around and walk back in the building. And he pulled it back up.
So, and the assumption is that he's doing this because
I'm the only person there. There's no other reason for him to back up and pull up and back up and pull up. There's no...
I've never experienced racism because I'm white.
But if I would tell you, if I was in that situation, I'd be like, he's looking at me because my haircut's weird and because I'm tall. Well, here's the thing.
And like, I don't belong here clearly.
Yeah, I look like I belong here.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
So what I would say, and I've had this conversation with a couple people that would never admit they have it. So it sucks because I would love to bring them to conversations like this. I know people that are Jewish that if a skinhead walked in here right now, the hair on the back of their neck would stand.
Okay.
They know, like, he doesn't like it. He can smile and shake their hands and, hey, how you doing? They can feel it. You can feel it. You can feel it in the energy in the room. I know that.
Okay.
I've watched it happen. It's happened to me my whole life. Happens to me with people all the time. And what sucks about that fight or flight feeling that you get, and as you get older,
I've had that.
Because as you get older, it's no longer a fight or flight feeling. It's just like, really? I'm with Chris and we're having drinks and we're kicking it, and a buddy of his from high school shows up and I'm like, he's gonna call me a nigga as soon as.
Okay.
And this is your friend. So we're going to all sit here and shoot the breeze. And then the next 2 times we hang out, he's not going to come. Why? Because you're my friend and you're not going to tell me that your guy doesn't like black people. You're just not going to invite him the next time. That's the equivalent. I've seen that with people who have relatives that are like that, have grandparents that are like that. Like, that's not the only way I've seen, and it sounds cheesy because you see it in movies, but the only way I've seen that change is when racist people of any persuasion, Nazis, racist Ku Klux Klan or whatever, are forced to spend extended periods of time in close quarters with the people they hate. Prejudice can't survive proximity. You see that in guys in the military. Yeah. You see that, but very often that doesn't happen. So what happens is they get distance, and because I'm so used to that, I call it my fight or flight. So it's like just being around a bad person. If you spent time around dangerous people of any color, you see this with guys who spend a lot of time in drug world and stuff like that, they know that's a pretty dangerous. Hey, I'm ready to go. You'll be out to eat or something, and the whole energy in the place changes. Unfortunately, you can't quantify that. You can't use that in court. I can't say to you, right. Somebody can't say to man, Nate, that guy Nate is dangerous. He's racist. Why? I can feel it. You can't quantify it. What attorneys will tell you is not what you know, it's what you can prove. There's a ton of that. And that exists in large part, at least I believe, in the Black community, because a lot of the racism that you've seen during that civil rights era had to be sussed out. And the Ku Klux Klan wore hoods for a reason. Yeah. Because they were doctors. They were teachers.
Or lawyers.
They were the doctors that let your son die on the operating table and then say, we did everything we could to save him. They were the teachers that tell your son, no, you should go to tech school. You can't be a doctor. They were those people. They were the dentists that won't pull your son's tooth, and now he has sepsis and his teeth are falling. There are people who tell you put your grandparents in a home because there's nothing else you can do for them. They're the same people that show up at Black Lives Matter rallies, not because they're there to help, but because they need to get their information so they know where to go back. That's the thing. And then when you look at minorities, we don't hide our faces. We're out here. We'll tell you everything. I'm so mad that we're going to protest and we're going to vote and we're going to do those things. How do you can't compete. So you have to have, man, that's why the scary animal survives and the brave one doesn't. If I shout it from the mountaintops, I'll get shot. I can't be the angry black guy in the room and be a successful luxury real estate agent at the same time. I get flack regularly because the name of my flack.
Oh, flack.
Because the name of my brokerage is Black Luxury Realty. I used to get stopped at my other car, and my logo on it, my pictures and all that stuff. And people would stop me at the gas station and call me racist. Oh, you only sell real estate to black people? Which I thought was really peculiar because you don't know my name or anything. If you Google Black luxury real estate agent, other than me and a couple other people, you see a whole bunch of real estate agents whose last name is Black. If it was Green Luxury Realty, it wouldn't be a problem.
Green's last name too.
But the only time,
but it's association. Yeah, I get it. I get it. It was the first place my head went. So
but that's a uniquely American thing, because I don't get that I've never had that from Brazilians, from South Americans, from anybody, because to them it's just a color. Right. But if you're white in America and you see the word black, you don't think color, you think race, you think a person. That's a whole.
And then my next question is like, oh, I don't even know if this is for this. This is just.
Well, hey, I'm here, man. Let's talk through it.
Oh man, because I just see it's all convoluted. I'm like to make, right? If you're trying to get the younger generation to not feel that way, to be able to edge it out with time, right? How do you, or we, right? It's like, people don't want me to use the N-word. It shouldn't be put in as much music as possible. I don't believe this to be true.
Okay.
It shouldn't be put into music, so that way I don't want to say it because I don't hear it, and because I don't hear, right? So like, but the word can be used in so many different ways. There's a book that just came out.
Yeah. Well, here's my take on that.
Yeah. And so I'm saying for black or for anything that we want to teach and move forward. And I could say the same thing I think about the Holocaust. It's like, there's a lot of Holocaust deniers, but if we keep pointing the finger at Germany, then this is how World War II started.
Yeah. But the people in Germany acknowledge that the Holocaust happened.
Right.
It was bad. It's been documented. They got paid. So the people who deny the Holocaust are a very small minority.
Okay.
They're outliers, kind of like people who said that elections were rigged up until about 4 years ago. They're a minority. So now those people are gaining traction, and they're gaining traction because they're creating a space for people who know that slavery, racism, all were wrong, and it makes them uncomfortable to talk about it. And if you give me an option to say, oh, my kids shouldn't have to learn about that, we're not going to talk about it because it makes me comfortable.
Well, I don't think it's the uncomfortable part. I think it's I'm not sure. I don't know enough. Yeah.
I think it's uncomfortable. You don't want your kids to come home and say, I don't want to be white. I've heard mothers say that,
man,
because a 10-year-old understands. If you watch Roots, are you familiar? Alex Haley's. If you watch Roots, if you watch the James Baldwin, I Am Not Your Negro. If you watch these documentaries, white people did some evil stuff. And if you look at that and you're like, how? And you're a kid now. Yeah. I look like them. I don't want to do that. So, but acknowledging that is this, you don't have to be. There were also people on the other side of this. There were people who were advocates, who were allies, who did amazing things to change that stuff. But we have to acknowledge that it happened and how messed up it really was, so that we can move on. Because if you keep saying it didn't happen, now the focus has to be on education. I have to teach my son that you can't talk like your white friends talk when you get pulled over. You can't do that. there's data that supports that, not just my
Right.
personal experience, your uncle's person. You can't do that. You can't walk into a store and get mad when the guy follows you around the store because he's going to call the police. And if he shoots you, he's going to get to go home. Like but we can't address that until I can explain them where this is where it came from. But if there's a constant effort to disregard where it came from, I can't get past it because we can't all agree that this is what happened. And that's on a fundamental level. There are people who say, well, slavery happened years ago. So there's no structural racism, even though the modern day policing was designed after slave catching. That's how they're taught. That's where the sheriff's star came from. But if we don't train you on these things, there have been plenty stories now, unfortunately, of police using black men's pictures at gun ranges for target practice. These are things that happen regularly, and people get to keep their jobs. So we have courthouses that are literally named after Confederate generals. They were named after Confederate generals to remind the black people that live in those communities who controlled. That has nothing to do with justice. That is domestic terrorism. But if you don't call it what it is and you say, oh, well, these are great people, two things can be true at the same time. You can have done great stuff for United States of America.
Lost.
Yes, let's move on. But they didn't.
Yeah.
They lost, but they didn't really lose because we get to keep all of this Confederate culture and hide behind that it's culture when the Civil War was in fact about slavery. It was part of the Articles of Secession. It had nothing to do with states' rights other than the fact that the states wanted to have the right to keep slaves.
Right.
That's how it works.
It's about money.
So you can spin it any other kind of way, but that's why when we talk about the stuff in the larger context, the issues become so convoluted.
Yeah.
Because everything seeps into everything, and you end up retreating into, I just want to increase diversity in luxury real estate.
Right.
Why? Because I can't fight everything. I can't fight all the battles. I just want to do this because there are a ton of people that are working on affordable housing. There are a bunch of people that are working on diversity in the construction industry. Okay, so I'm just going to go over here and work on this. And in order for me to work on this, I'm sure whenever this podcast airs, I have white friends that are going to call me and be like, "Nate, what the fuck are you doing?" Why? Because it makes people uncomfortable when that's how it works. So, but if nobody talks about it,
this is why I want to talk about it.
That's why I can't. Because if I don't provide an evidence-based approach to this, I sound like an angry black man who's saying, "Well, how come black people can live in Miami Beach? Why?" But Overtown exists because Miami Beach used to be a sundown town where black people had to leave. Fisher Island was owned by a black man. He was creating a resort for black people, but because he couldn't get the black people over to the island because of it was on the wrong side of the tracks in the literal sense, he sold it to Carl Fisher, who then turned Miami Beach into a place where black people couldn't be after dark.
Oh, wow.
So there's all this history, like, well, how do you talk about these things?
Just like this.
Exactly. So, but having those conversations, the post where we ended up scheduling this from, we'll talk about, people talk about the skills gap and all this stuff. And they'll go, no, black people are just lazy. They can't do it. No, well, you can't be what you can't see.
Can't be what you can't see. So if you can't see it, you can't dream to be it type of thing?
Because you don't know it exists.
Oh, okay.
You can't be an astronaut if you don't know there are people that go to the moon. You can't be a luxury real estate agent if you can't be a real estate agent if you don't know that people sell real estate. If all you see is sports and entertainment, if the only successful people you see are sports and entertainers, and this isn't just a race issue, that's very much a class issue. There are kids all over the world who went from soccer to football, basketball, baseball, and all they see when it comes to achievement is sports. So I have to be really good at sports. The reason I spend the amount of money I spend on cars, I have friends who are rappers. I got buddies who are entertainers, and they got all this wonderful stuff, and they drive around the neighborhoods and they go back to the community, and all the kids see, most young people, especially when they're in elementary school, middle school, they want nice things. So what they grift or what they gravitate to is, how did you get that? I was a basketball player. I was a rapper. I was a drug dealer. I was a soccer player. Okay, I want to be a soccer player. Why? Because I want that. So now when there are young people that went to school with my daughters who have their real estate license today, because they saw me and said, what does your dad do? He doesn't look like he plays ball. Oh, my daughter used to call me a real estater. My dad's a real estater. Really? Oh, I should probably think about this real estate stuff. So there's other ways you can achieve, but if you don't know that those things exist, then to take that one level further to make it real estate specific, the vast majority of minorities get into real estate and they get told affordable housing, the wealth gap. White people make 5 times as much than black people. The savings rate is a fraction. Average white family is worth $200,000. Average black family
I don't know none of this.
Yeah, well, I'll send you the data, but it's like the average black family has like a net worth of $8. Average white family has like $200,000. Like the disparities are crazy. But the point being is that if people are being taught, hey, you should be selling affordable housing or middle market housing because there's no rich people other than athletes and entertainers that can buy that stuff, you should just go over here, when that is patently false. My largest clients have nothing to do with sports or entertainment, and they are worth hundreds of millions. But if nobody is talking to them, if nobody's letting them know that people like me exist, one, so they can find me to use me, and then I'm not visible enough to tell other young agents, hey, you don't have to go work in a sports and entertainment division to make a bunch of money. Now, if that's your background, of course, there are athletes come into real estate all the time and they sell their friends or athletes. We see that a lot here in South Florida. The wives of that, basketball wives and all types of other stuff. But there's a whole group of wealthy black people that no one talks. If we're talking about a basketball team, we're talking about what, 8 guys? I don't know how many guys are on.
I think there are like 25 on the team.
25
I don't know
people
that to be entirely true,
but okay, 25 guys on Miami.
Yeah, that's it.
So there are over 100,000 real estate agents in the state of Florida. So we got, let's say that just a quarter of them, 25,000 of them are trying to argue over 25 plays.
Right.
There are way more private equity guys, business owners, entrepreneurs, doctors, lawyers, who are all black and can buy $1 million condo today. If no one's catering to them, because at large, we don't act like they exist, that's where I come in. Like, hey, well, there's other people out here. There are entrepreneurs, there are business owners, there are private equity guys, hedge fund guys that are all African-American and want to spend a bunch of money. Like there's opportunities here, but somebody has to say, well, I want to address that. And what I'm finding is it becomes overwhelming, which is one of the reasons our conversation is going in so many directions, because it becomes overwhelming when I talk about it, because it goes in every direction. There's racism over there and there's racism over there and there's racism over there. So, okay, what can I focus on without having a nervous breakdown and going outside and so some of it is just baseline racism. Okay, if a cop shows up, he might shoot. I got to tell my kids that if I'm walking through the store, yeah, they're probably looking at me that way because I'm black. If I walk out and go, well, I have to be knowledgeable, but I can't fight those battles. I just want to make a bunch of money, be able to take care of my kids and educate all the people around me about this is what's going on. Do with it what you will, but these are the facts. And the vast majority of our institutions in the United States have very little political will to address those things in a meaningful way, because they just argue over them again and again and again and again. There are kids in red states that don't know anything about slavery. They don't know about Holocaust. They don't know about Rosewood. They don't know. There were at least 3 race massacres in the state of Florida, where white people just descended on the city and decided we're just going to kill all these people because somebody made a random accusation that black guy touched my wife, which later is found out that it's not true, but it doesn't matter now because we killed 300 people and we burned the city down. But if nobody tells you that, it's like, what's going on?
It's about to come out of my mouth it sounds very American. It sounds like what the original Americans did to the Indians. It just sounds like that's very tribal.
But that is when that's a fundamental truth. Like that's what makes my great grandfather.
Then the Native Americans got money.
Oh, see? I wasn't going to say that part. That's why I just Oh, thank you. My brain goes fast now. I start sweating. Thank you. My wife will tell you, I spend a lot, especially when I first got here, because I was incredibly uncomfortable talking about all the things that I watched happen. One, because I was new. So when I first got into real estate, and I'd be in these places and I'm with these incredibly rich people. I'm the only Black person there, and I'm really enjoying taking all this information in and learning and learning and learning. And they all think gentrification is a good thing. They're like, oh, this community is changing. It's really gentrifying over there. We should go by. And they don't realize that where I'm from, gentrification is incredible. That's problematic. That means when somebody says that means we're getting pushed out. They're going to put a Whole Foods over here. They're going to jack up all the rents, and now we have to move, which is exactly what's happening on Sistra.
And I'm trying to buy it. Perpetuating the problem.
Well, but here's what I would say to that. And this is part of the management of gentrification. Understanding, as an artist, you by default have a much closer connection to the character and culture of any community you move into. Like you go to Wynwood, you don't just say, "Oh, this is pretty." You say, "Man, who painted that?"
Right.
That's really cool. Who painted that? I want to know how this became this, not just, "Oh, this is great. I'm going to buy a condo there." By doing that, engaging in community organizations so you understand what's going on, then you get to become a part of that community instead of coming in and just changing the community to whatever you think it should be. So Richmond Heights down in South Miami, is a great example. Richmond Heights was built for Black World War II veterans because they could not buy homes anywhere else. It was built by a man. Well, he started it and then he died and his brother finished it. It was built by a man who realized the guys he served with couldn't get homes anywhere else, in large part because a lot of stuff they talk about there in color law. They mentioned Richmond Heights or Overtown in the book by name. So now when a lot of the people that move into Richmond Heights are not Black, the agents that sell them the homes are not Black. They know very little about the community. They don't do anything to engage in what's going on in the community. So when there are things that happen there, celebrations, the annual Christmas celebration at the park, all types of, they're much more likely to complain about the noise than they are to engage in the celebration. And as the older members of those communities move out because they pass on, their kids leave or whatever, and the property values increase, which makes the property taxes go up. So a lot of those fixed income people can't maintain those homes over long periods of time. Eventually, no one remembers that this community was started for Black World War II veterans. So understanding where you move to is a fundamental. Every community has turnover. We all grew up in neighborhoods where there was new kids that moved in and people who parents got a job or transferred, they had to move out. It's not a question of don't buy there because you don't want to be part of the problem. Being part of the solution is being engaged into where you're moving. So that's, hey, this is great. Tell me more. What's going on here? Now, where did that come from? Where did this, and that to me it's an amazing thing about being an artist, because artists, you guys have to be cognizant of the surroundings because there's art, there's inspiration everywhere. There's art all over the place. But when you don't look at it that way, when you look at it in a way that says, buy low, sell high, hey, we can get that big field over there, that building, and redevelop it and build some $500,000 condos that nobody who lives here right now can afford. That's not or we're going to build a big old apartment building that doesn't really help ownership in the community at all, but we can make a whole bunch of money, and we're going to call it affordable housing when it's just essentially barely workforce housing, but none of the people who live in the community benefit from the upside of it. Like we're going to buy your house for $200,000, even though it's worth $500,000. And I know you don't know that. So I'm going to send you this contract, right? So as a real estate agent, part of what I do when I talk to people is just educate them on how much your house is worth. So, because they don't know. And in many cases, these aren't just food deserts, they're information deserts. Where do you go to find out how much your home is worth? If there's no real estate office
The
in your
internet?
community, you're assuming that
Zillow?
someone, what if you don't have internet access?
This is something we were talking about earlier. I don't like the idea of public schools. I think everybody should be on a tablet or YouTube education. I learned how to do this through YouTube education.
But you're assuming that they have access to
I'm making the assumption that Elon...
and that they can read and that they know how to use technology.
Okay.
And that they're not hungry, because if I haven't had a full meal, I can't focus. And I'm not being abused. And there's layers to all types of...
Okay.
Yeah. That's why kids, their abuse spiked during the pandemic. It spikes during the summertime because kids can't eat. They're home more often. The parents are stressed out. They can't feed them. So, and that's a race and class issue. So
it's also we've got a horrible diet issue, and I feel like that's something that could be solved too if everybody just ate meat.
Well, but that requires me to have a meat market nearby.
And that does require you to have a meat market nearby. Oh man, this was the shopping centers that we were talking about. All right, but then to me, I see that as an entrepreneur, as an opportunity, and then
that requires somebody to be interested in Black people eating.
Okay, I'm interested in Black people eating.
Then why is there hasn't been a meaningful food market on Sistrum in a decade?
I feel like there was one on Sunrise on the right-hand side, small spot. But then then the next question is like,
go to Opelika, Overtown.
If you don't have a car or good public transportation, then how do you get these places? And
then the prices, how do you afford it? If you're not making a living wage, how do you get there if you can't afford the bus fare to get there? How do you get there if you can't get off work to get there? Because when you get off work, you get charged by the minute. You don't know if you have kids. Daycare charges you by the minute if you're late.
Oh, hell no.
So that means I have a choice. Do I go pick up my kid and then grocery shop at 7-Eleven? Or do I try to go somewhere else and then risk being late? But if I'm $10 over, I don't have $10 to pay my daycare. So I can't bring my kid back tomorrow because I don't have $10. But I got to bring the kid because I got to go to work. Like they're layered problems. Like,
that's a classism thing. Okay. Thanks.
that is why I believe some of the most productive things I can do is to pick my battles, and the battle I've chosen, the place that I'm most passionate about, is increasing diversity in luxury real estate.
Okay, let's talk about it, because
stuff.
That was the real reason I brought you here. Except you put this book in my hand, and we had talked about race, and it's a heavy topic, and you're willing to talk about it. So
if we don't talk about it, nobody changes. You gotta talk about it.
Let's typically what I do is I go, hey man, who are you? What do you do for work? Where do you do it? And then I ask you about your hobbies. But today was different and probably better for it, actually. One of the things that I am trying to do is figure out how I would like to be. I don't believe it entirely in my heart yet, but I would like to get myself on the path to become a Joe Rogan or there's a Jewish man with curly hair who is really popular back in the day. He was a shock jock, Howard Stern.
Yes.
Howard Stern. And so along the lines of a Howard Stern,
or a Joe Rogan, and the only thing I have to do is just keep having conversations with people. And the more conversations I have, the better I'll get at it. And the better I get at it, the more I'll be able to continue this. But the value that I'm trying to bring is to be able to give people an opportunity to have their first time having conversations, or not just having conversations, because I shoot people at the beginning of their career, the end of their, well, not the end, the middle of their career, and politicians, porn stars. And I feel like everybody's got information or an opportunity to maybe talk, and I can learn something.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot with
you. I'm happy. And you're an awesome dude, man. You're good at this. This is good stuff.
I want to keep doing this, and so we're going to come back on another day for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm not cutting this right this second, but I
work on, and I'm sure we're going to get in real estate, but I want to sort of give a little more context to why I carry around the books.
Sure.
And this, what I found, translates to anything. So you can use it in photography or anywhere. The vast majority of people, and I'm sure you've seen this, when people ask about what you do or what's important to you or any issue, most of the time they are asking, I would say 85 to 90%, they're asking to be cordial. I don't really want to go deep in what you do. I'm standing there holding a drink. You're standing next to me. I'm like, hey, so what do you do? And I'm going to say some random thing I know about photography and then move on. Same thing with real estate with me. When we talk about just real estate in general or diversity, or usually they'll crack a joke about me being the only Black person here or something like that. And then it moves on. What the 15% of people that are interested, what I've found the best way to provide value for them is to be able to connect them with resources. Most of the people I give those books don't read. They'll read the back. They might go, he has a bunch of really good.
It's also an audiobook. It's free on Amazon.
And Robert Rothstein has some really good talks, the author, on YouTube. And a lot of them are short, like 15, 20 minutes. But I try to be a person who can connect someone who really cares about whatever I'm saying with resources, because it's too heavy of a lift. And this is like that video in many cases, in the context of race or any minority, when you are the person that's a member of that minority, you have to speak for everybody. And it's your job to educate everybody in the room on all of the plight of the LGBT community, or all of the Black community, or the Cuban community, or the Haitian diaspora, or you have to do that. And that, to me, is that's not a fair thing when most of the people we're talking to, they just want to win an argument. But if you genuinely want to know, then my best tool is to be able to say, hey, you should read The Color of Law. And when you finish that one, you should read The Whiteness of Wealth. And when you finish that one, you should read A Bubble in the Sun, right? These are all books that are either real estate related for South Florida or race, but they're books that'll give you meaningful information about race and real estate. And then next time we talk, man, I did not know that redlining was that bad. I did not know that. So it's not me just saying it.
Yeah.
It's okay. If you care, you can go research it, and then you can go down the rabbit hole on your own. There's a ton of stuff he references there and all types of things. But I find that to be the most powerful. When I meet agents, whether I mentor agents all the time, when agents come to my brokerage, The Color of Law is required reading. You got to read it. Why? So you understand what's going on. There for A Bubble in the Sun, which is another one that a wonderful gentleman by the name of Samson Williams suggested to me, because somebody suggested it to him, that talks about how all of Florida was built and how you can draw a direct line, believe it or not, between the Great Depression and the real estate market in South Florida. So it's a really good.
Give me the rough of it real quick.
Speculation. So Meisner, Flagler, Fisher, all the stuff, Merrick, everybody who has stuff named about it, started out building really amazing stuff. Eventually they believed their own hype and sold it even more than it should be. So they just kept going and going and going. And then the bottom fell out. And that bottom, of course, I'm grossly oversimplifying it, but that that was the pinprick to pop the bubble of what was
The Great Depression.
it's so.
What's
but
the name of the book?
he's A Bubble in the Sun.
Oh, cool. I can't
It's
wait to
the-
read that now.
And he goes into way much like Richard Rothstein. He goes into very deep detail on the lives of all these guys. So it's not just this is Henry Flagler, this is what he did. This is George Merrick. This he goes into where they were born, how they grew up, and all the stuff they did, and the vast majority of them died in very interesting positions. I won't spoil it for you, but
Okay.
But I like information that then gives you context to how all this other stuff happens.
It's like history.
Yes.
Oh, it is history.
Yep. But when you
It is
have the
history.
context of your life experience, so I've spent all of my life between South Miami and Atlanta as far as living. I've been here, so I watch these things. I've seen these guys' names. I've heard people talk about Henry Flagler and Fisher Island and all these things. So when you hear you hear other people write books about them, you're like, man, I didn't know that my mom had hung out with Muhammad Ali until we were leaving the Ali movie and when Will Smith's movie came. But and she said something, she was walking to the car, she said, he was really nice. He just talked a lot. And I had no idea that my mom even knew him.
Oh, wow.
But when he was training in South Miami for something. But my point in that is that gave a whole different context to Muhammad Ali trained in Miami. Really? It was no longer an abstract thing. It was like, my mom was there. That was crazy. So when reading history and a lot of these things for me, when they talk about places that I've been, they talk about buildings that I know. Sir John Hotel used to be in down in Overtown. My mom used to swim at that hotel. She used to talk about it all the time. So when I see it in an article or somewhere, it gives a real connection to that. I think providing people who are interested in learning more about what you do or what's passionate to you, books that give them context and make it relevant to them is very powerful, because then it allows them to be able to take it in. I don't want you to take it in with my bias on it. I want you to be able to take it in and say, well, that's the information. And then, man, but what about, because then you may read Color Law and say, well, I get that, but this right here, I'm not sure if I agree with that. So, and that's where the conversation starts, to be able to say, okay, well, I understand what you're saying, but if you didn't read the book, then you wouldn't understand why the people in Overtown are so pissed, or why folks get so concerned about what's going on in Opelika, because then you just get the news version.
Okay.
You want to have the context of, well, this is why they're so mad. Can you imagine why Native Americans are so pissed off? Why? Because they have 1,000 treaties that have been broke. So why would they believe in another agreement? But if you have no context for that, you're like, why are they so mad? Why don't they just sign the agreement?
Yeah.
So I try to provide as part of what hey, you don't take my word for it. Just read this. Let me know what you think. And when you finish with that one, I got another one I can let you read. And for me, it's all real estate related. That's why A Bubble in the Sun talks a little bit about the exploitation of Black people, but it's almost like a footnote in that book. It's much more about the market in general, the men who built it and the people around them, and how South Florida became South Florida. It was much better than I knew it was going to be good just because it was about Florida, but it was much better than I thought.
I thought it was all from drugs.
Well, that was later. That was later. There was a little bit of that, but this is pre-drugs. That's not coke. This was
not in the
pre-cocaine.
80s.
No, this was before the 80s. This
Okay.
was back when this was all swamp, when this was part of the Saltwater Underground Railroad. So there were slaves that caught Harriet Tubman in the north, but there were also slaves that escaped and ended up in South Florida.
South Florida was free?
South Florida was owned by the Spanish. So there were settlements here. Controlled by Spanish. Yeah.
That's something I didn't know.
They used to call it the Saltwater Underground Railroad.
And so they would escape from
Georgia,
come down south.
Mm-hmm.
Could they own land?
I don't think that. But yes, there were instances of people owning land, but there were a lot of settlements here that just because they were freed slaves. And I can't think of the name of the Spanish guy they had a fort here. And he would he would give slaves, they would be free people when they got here. So there's a lot of history in Florida just beyond.
I know just recently we passed a law that allows Asians to own property finally after, I think it was World War II. So like laws are written by the people who are dominating by the time of the time.
Yeah. If the hunter always tells the story, the lion will never be the hero. And the same hunter has been telling the story of America for hundreds of years.
Now, do you believe that is changing now or no?
I believe,
because I want to say yes.
I believe that it changes very slowly. And I believe that there's often the illusion of change before there is real change. And the illusion of change makes people not try as hard. So one of the phrases I've used a lot lately, unfortunately, is that most people don't want to be free. They just want really comfortable cages.
That's a city, period, though. Is that from 1984? That sounds like
I can't even remember where I read it. But they don't want the diversity and the equality and all, because all of that comes with a very high price. It comes with it's like being a business owner, right? You want the freedom to come and go, but that comes with the responsibility of having a staff. And that comes with the responsibility of having to pay that staff so they can take care of their families. And that's pressure. That's not freedom.
Right.
So it's freedom in the sense that you can come and go, but it's pressure because now there are people. Or you could just go work for somebody else and put your entire existence in their hands because they're paying you $100,000 a year. So
Right.
It's a really pretty cage. It's a cage nonetheless, but it's a really pretty cage. And most people don't want. Well, with that analogy to me holds true for politics. If we want to change things in the state of Florida or in any, that means we're going to have to talk. We're going to have to gather people, right, and have really uncomfortable conversations. That's going to require a lot of people to admit who their allegiances are to. There are people who will tell you they voted for Donald Trump when they really voted for Joe Biden. They're going to go to their grave with that. There are people who will say they voted for John McCain when they voted for Barack Obama because they saw Sarah Palin. They're like, I'm not going to do it. And in order to get things changed, that level of honesty, I don't think it exists in the United States.
Did it used to?
It existed in the negative sense. I think it was much easier to say, I don't like Black people. I don't want them here. I don't want you here. Now I can't say that, right? I can just say it with my actions.
Okay.
So I don't think the reverse has ever been true. Unfortunately, I think it exists in very, very small examples that tell people that, man, there are still good people out there. It exists in conversations like this, and the people that you surround yourself with, the people I talk to, those are the circles that I think sort of overlap with that. You got people that around you that love you, that completely agree with what you're saying. They're like, man, I want to learn more. The other people are like, man, Chris is on some other shit, but he's cool, he's fun to drink with. So, and that overlap is where the magic happens, because you can move in both of those spaces and be respected by both of those people. I don't think people like us exist as I don't think people like you specifically. I call them the John McCains of politics. There are no more John McCains. There are either people who are willing to champion what's right, or there are people who will just go along to get along, even if that means we're going to pass really bad legislation and not get any meaningful change. So as the diversity in the country changes, as those demographics start to shift, that is what I think changes the proximity of people to diversity, changes how they look at it. If your daughter comes home with a brown grandbaby, you can't. It's kind of hard to not like Black people. That's because now you don't have a choice. Or you have to make a very
or you
serious
gotta make the choice.
And most I've heard that story dozens of times, that grandbabies are grandbabies, and grandparents love being grandparents, even if it means they got to be real uncomfortable because they're not giving up a pretty baby. But that is the pace at which I see change coming. I don't think there are, I can't remember, a guy, he called them not in my backyard liberal type. I want to help you. I think affordable housing is important, just not in my neighborhood.
Got it.
So it doesn't, you know what I mean? And that's like, yeah, that's great, but not over here.
Do you think that that's because it's going to get into education and or a willingness to like, I can choose to be lazy and I've done it. I want to work until 1 o'clock in the afternoon and I do the 5 o'clock in the morning thing. The only difference was a switch inside of my head and I decided I needed to do it. When you're, it's probably, I'm conflating classism and racism or race to possibly be the same thing, where like when you have people who don't make as much, it can be like, I drive by homeless people all the time. It is uncomfortable for me sometimes when they come up next to me and I don't have $1 to give them.
Mm-hmm.
When you're wealthy, you don't want to be dealing with the problems that come with the people who aren't wealthy.
Mm-hmm. But you also,
and I'm not wealthy.
Yeah, but often people will not want to deal with solutions to fix those problems because they don't want to spend the money on it. So there's, you know, I remember when there's a building in downtown Miami, 1000 Museum, beautiful building. It is the architectural equivalent, in my opinion, of owning a Picasso.
Okay.
Zaha Hadid was the architect. She's a female architect. She won the Pritzker, I believe, which is basically the architectural equivalent of a Nobel Peace Prize. She died before the building was finished. That was her only residential condo building in the Western Hemisphere. Penthouse there is like $40 million, something crazy. Starting price was like $5 million. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. And at that point, at that time, the pricing on that building made it one of the most expensive if not the most expensive, when it was pre-construction. And we all know the homeless population in downtown Miami. And I was there one day showing somebody who was looking at units, and somebody that was there, it wasn't with us, but they made a comment when they had paid the valet and were coming in about the homeless people that were sleeping on the sidewalk. And like, nobody's gonna buy a $10 million condo here if they got to step over homeless people on the couch on the sidewalk. And the guy I was with, he looked at me, he said, clearly he has never been to New York, because I've come out of Lady Gaga's building where there's a $50 million penthouse across from Central Park. There's a dozen homeless people right there. So the issue becomes that rather than figure out how we can address this, we'll just step over. We'll just ignore them and act like they're not, because it takes money to do that. And then when
well, not only take the money, but it takes housing, and then those people have to take care of themselves. And the question is really whether or not,
and there's the percentage of them that don't want to do it,
right? And then don't.
And when you roll that into, if I spend $5 million on a house, do I really want a $200,000 house next door? Do I want that?
Right.
So then that gets into the zoning stuff. And then it gets into government tax agreements, or how can we incentivize developers, the private sector, to build affordable housing?
That's attractive.
That's attractive. That's in a good location. That's sustainable. How do we build those ecosystems? Because that's public-private partnership. I'm homeless and I'm going to get into some sort of program that takes me from homeless to skills training to being self-sufficient. It's kind of like some of the reentry programs you see when guys come home from prison. Like the recidivism rate on that is super high when they don't have anything to do. But when you give them training, when you give them community, when you give them meaningful work, their likelihood to go back, drops really, really low. But there are very few people who have a vested interest to do that, when it's much easier right now. It's much easier for me to go to anywhere in the state of Florida and start building $500,000, $1 million houses and make a bunch of money than it is for me to go build $300,000 houses and make a little bit. Because the land costs way more. I can't get any tax breaks on it. Financing is an issue for interest rates and finishes and all that other stuff, but it's really easy to sell $1 million house. Really quick. Like, that's because there's no developers are followers. They're not innovators by nature. So they just say, oh, that works. I'm going to do that.
That's
that
really
works.
interesting.
Think about how often you see apartment buildings pop up in clusters. Oh, you built an apartment building there. Those numbers work really well. I'm going to build an apartment building there.
That's exactly what's happening in Fort Lauderdale right now.
Yes.
Wow.
And that's also why there is very little condo inventory in Fort Lauderdale, because nobody's interested in building condos unless they're $1 million condos. When's the last time you saw a $300,000 condo in Fort Lauderdale?
The last time I bought one.
So, because they're not here, there's no one. What I think long term, one of the opportunities is ultimately going to be is you're going to see if the current trend in office space continues. So the office real estate market is taking a huge hit because of remote work and stuff like that. I believe that there's an opportunity there to convert a lot of that office space to residential.
Yes.
In a way that could probably be used to address some affordability issues and stuff like that. But from a ownership perspective, I get it. I am going to probably own a hotel, maybe a condo hotel, hopefully in the near future. But I believe that there's a need for affordable condos, $300,000-$400,000 condos. Not stuff you got to give away, but stuff that if you get up and go to work if you're a teacher, you should be able to buy a condo. Like that, I think that type of stuff is going to get built, and the stuff that sort of transitions people into that will probably come out of whatever use cases we see for office. The next level of that, I believe, will be a lot of the things we see getting built now in Fort Lauderdale on places like Sistrunk and some of the stuff that we just see just west of US 1. Those places eventually will get converted to condos that are like sort of one level up. That are the sites, but just some of the buildings, like some of these new apartment buildings, at some point it's going to make financial sense for a developer to come in and just remodel a place. And instead of renting these places out for $2,000-$3,000 a month, we can sell them between $3,000 and $550. So you're not they're excuse me, they're still apartments, so the footprint of them is still relatively small, but you can get ownership out of
your
that
apartment. My question for that is though, then, like, so what happens when so like the condo association becomes a problem typically, and then after that it's like I think they're passing a law right this second. Man, I need to know more, but thank you for being here. They're passing laws to make sure that you have to have because of the hurricanes and stuff and the buildings that crashed.
Yep. Building code, the 40-year inspection.
The 40-year inspection. You have to have enough money in your reserves now.
Yes.
And so they're requiring everybody to be up to that. What happens when you have a teacher who owns one of these places and that type of thing occurs? Now, I know you don't have the answer, but I'm just saying that.
Well, but I do. I think part of the issue in those places. So, all right, I'm going to step back. And I've been in Champlain Towers before it crumbled. There were some beautiful units in there. I tried to sell a couple. I want to say I did a rental back there, but I've been in that building. A lot of the buildings on the beach that are in that era are full of seniors, retirees who bought those units 30 years ago when this was their retirement place. They bought them on a fixed income for $200,000, $100,000, beautiful place. I'm going to die here. And they're on a fixed income. So I don't have any more money. So when my maintenance goes up, that's an issue. So what happens is that over time, the maintenance on those oceanfront buildings, because of the salt water, because of the erosion, goes up incrementally because they're like, hey, the insurance is going. Insurance. Okay, well, now we need to get, like in the instance of Champlain Towers, we need to get the pool fixed. It's cracked. We need to get the parking deck fixed. It's cracked. And they don't have the money for those. Because they don't have the money for them, because they came in to the building at a time when it wasn't built to specifications that could have foresaw the amount of climate change and wear and tear on the building. And they weren't in a position to be proactive, probably just because of the collective disposition of the condo board to say, let's pay for it now. When they could, they kicked the can down the road so far.
That's what happens with a lot of these places.
Because they can't afford it. And instead of saying we're going to move, they do what a lot of upper middle class people do in those situations when they can't afford it. They say, we need another quote. No, let's get another quote. That quote's too expensive. We need another one. And then 6 months later, you get another quote, and that quote is more expensive because it's 6 months more worth of damage. And well, that one's too expensive. We need another quote. And that's exactly what was happening at Champlain Towers. Okay, we're going to keep kicking the can down the road until ultimately the building comes. And I unfortunately, I think there are going to be variations of that scenario that can continue to play out because there are a lot of people who bought these oceanfront condos as their dream. This is where I'm going to die. And now you're telling me I got to sell this and move to Century Village, in a place that's a fraction of the size with no water view. I'm not going to do that. So they end up in tight spots. That connects to, say, a condo conversion, in that if a school teacher buys a $400,000 condo today, one, that building is built very different. But two, we have financial structures that say, hey, this is what the maintenance is going to be for X amount of years. It's probably going to go up 10% every 5 years based on these management projections. So as long as nothing crazy happens, I think we're very close to the high water mark for insurance in the state of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably going to still get a little higher for maybe another 2 years or so, probably until we get another governor and then they sort it out. It's going to come down, but I think in a large part it'll come down from some combination of subsidies and more diversification in the market. But that combined with just more stable forecasting means that once you're in, you won't have to expect for these outrageous swings in you won't expect your association dues to go from $300 to $800 because we need a new elevator now. And a lot of these older buildings, those are the types of things that jack up your association.
You're saying that doesn't happen as often today because of newer
buildings.
The
wear and tear, what's making a lot of these big ass assessments on these buildings is they're getting 4-year inspections and there's cracks, there's foundation issues that are creating those problems. So if we have to fix all the balconies and fix the elevator, and that's a $4 million project, and we're a 200 unit building, so now we got to go get a loan for $4 million to fix this, but we got to spread that loan out over these 200 units. Now every unit has an assessment of $400 and your maintenance was already $350. So now your maintenance is $750 on top of your mortgage. That's just not feasible.
Yeah.
So usually the repairs don't get done. So I think long term, that will be less of an issue because people coming into the homes will be in a financial position, understanding what I'm getting into, and the likelihood of your association dues jumping like that will be much, much less. On top of, I do believe that as the insurance environment changes in South Florida, probably after we get the next Andrew, because it's come Hurricane Andrew.
Okay.
Like we haven't had a real hurricane in a very long time. We've had hurricanes, and this isn't to marginalize what happened in Fort Myers or anything like that.
Right.
But we haven't had a hurricane. Andrew was a hurricane. and we haven't had anything.
Did you experience it?
I came back afterwards.
Okay.
So I talked to my grandfather about it, and that was the hurricane that made him start evacuating.
Oh, wow.
Tore the roof off the house. I remember looking at what is now Cutler Bay.
Uh-huh.
At that time, it was Cutler Ridge. The mall was flat. The whole back of the mall had fell off. It looked like somebody took a rake and just raked it across. It was flat.
Do you stay or do you go?
Up until I think the last one we left, because I have my wife and my mom lives with me. If I'm being honest, I leave because of them.
Uh-huh.
And lack of electricity. I have teenage daughters. I've not left.
You could do it, but you got family. I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No electricity and a wife and kids and all, yeah. If you live in a house that was built in the last, say, 20 years or so,
Can you grab me another water, brother?
that house is probably going to be fine. Wind-wise, you still might get some roof damage, but beyond that, thank you, sir.
For sure.
Beyond that, I'm structurally, most of your homes will be fine. My larger concern when it comes to storms is power. So like when I buy my house and I have a generator and all, then I probably, but if you're, the problem right now, I think I see with infrastructure is electricity comes here back in water. If you're close to the beach, you can't, there's nothing you can do about a 6-foot storm surge. The ocean is the ocean. You can't.
It's coming.
Yeah, and that's it. That's all you got. So in those cases, depending on where I'm at, then I'd evacuate closer I'm to the water. But beyond that, I asked my grandfather, we were talking about Andrew one time, and he said, because he ended up, the whole roof got torn off the house. He ended up in the bathroom holding a mattress over his head. House got flooded. It was crazy. And he said he was, at the time of the hurricane, my grandfather bought his house in 1952, I believe, 51. And he had been through storms before, and he said, I've never heard wind like that. So what I think is going to happen after we get another significant weather event in South Florida is large parts of very sexy areas right now will become uninsurable. So you won't be able to get Alton Road. You're not going to be able to build a house there because you won't be able to get homeowners insurance.
What's Alton Road? Where's Alton Road?
Miami Beach. So go down around by the golf course. Beautiful homes there, but it floods in sunny days. Like they have sunny day flooding. So when we get the high king tide, the water just backs up through the drains, and sun will be out, and there'll be a half a foot of water in Mill Street.
Oh.
So I think what is going to happen in those places, because right now I've had conversations with clients who I'm showing big old houses in some of these places. And as someone who wants a house on the beach, I want on the ocean. I want something that I know climate change. I know it's real. I see it all the time. Having those conversations, they'll say, well, as long as I can get insurance on it, I'll buy it. Why? Because if the ocean comes and takes it back, the insurance company will write me a check and I can go build another house somewhere. So for them, it's enjoyment. It's not necessarily investment at that price point.
Right. Once you're in the luxury market, it seems to be a different.
In many cases,
yes.
Like it's, some of them have different calculus, but when they decide, well, this is what I want, as long as I can protect that investment with homeowners insurance, then I'll buy it. Now, as soon as I can't get homeowners insurance, then I'll just go build somewhere else. I think what's going to happen in a lot of those places is we'll get a storm that damages those homes to the point where they're uninhabitable. And the insurance companies will make the payouts, but they won't renew the policies. So those areas become parks. They become other...
Or water parks.
Or even if the water leaves, but because of their low lying and stuff like that, we see in places like Little Haiti right now, we see what's been termed as climate gentrification. Little Haiti sits on a ridge. If you ever drive through it, it never floods. It's some of the highest elevation in all of South Florida. So what's happening now is a lot of developers are going to Little Haiti and they're buying up all the stuff because upwards of 80% of the people that live there are renters, They're pushing them out and they're building condos, luxury condos, because it never floods.
It doesn't flood. And so because it doesn't flood,
Yep.
better value on the property.
Yep. Lower insurance,
Yeah.
long-term value. So the people who are there are getting displaced. They go, which is a whole nother thing, but that's the tie between climate change, flooding, and another thing that affects a lot of communities of color. But I think after our next significant weather event, that's going to change how people look at building luxury homes, because there are going to be areas where they just can't build it more, because the insurance companies are going to say, well, you can build that, we're not going to insure it. And that changes everything.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. But I don't think they're going to stop buying, though. I think we'll still have a couple thousand people that move to Florida every day. They're not going to stop.
People aren't going to stop. The weather's too good.
The weather's too good, and I think after we no longer have the current governor, between that and the former president that lives here now, I think a lot of what I've heard from very upper middle class people, especially wealthy people who have options, is that politicians are seasonal. Kind of the way I think Disney looks at Ron DeSantis. Like, okay, we've been here for 100.
How they're looking at it.
Well, we've been here for 100 years. He's been here for 6.
Got it.
So when a lot of the confrontation that they're having with the zoning and all that stuff, well, we just got to be here until the next governor comes, and then we'll get all the stuff. Like that's, if you take the long view of the Supreme Court and the presidency and stuff, like, oh, affirmative action went away, great. Well, we just got to wait for 2 more Supreme Court justices to die and a Democratic president to appoint 2 more justices. Then we get affirmative action back, and then Roe versus Wade comes back. So in the long term sense of things, I don't think everyone looks at it that way, but I think there's a class of people that have the luxury of being able to look at it that way, because their current financial position gives them a certain level of comfort, and they have options. So, if everything goes south, what are you going to do? I'll just leave. Where you go? Europe. I moved to the Bahamas. Why? Because you have the option to do that. You can just go hop on a plane and go somewhere. So you don't have to be outraged now because you understand the political cycle, and there are no real consequences for what's going on for you. Versus there's a different class of people. That's the outrage you see when someone gets killed by a cop, black or white in many cases, is that reminds all of us working class folks that have to drive around every day how dangerous it is to get pulled over by a cop. Whereas people who don't have to worry about that, then that's not a thing to them. So, because they have, I just have a driver. Or I drive a $200,000 car.
It's bulletproof.
Or when I get pulled over in the Rolls Royce, they ask me, can they see the interior? Not, can they see my driver's license? So I think there's context there. And that right now is the class of people that is very much moving to South Florida, because those are the only people that can afford the real estate.
Right.
Eventually, we're going to have to start building more for employees and not just employers.
Right.
And the layer on top of that will become, eventually those employees are going to want to own and not be perpetual renters. Then the employers will have to start paying them. Because if you pay them, they move here just because they can afford the rent. But then you get married, have a kid, you don't want to rent anymore. And by then, Orlando will be Jacksonville will be unaffordable. Thanks to Brightline, I think we're going to see more people living in Orlando and working in Brickell.
I would love that.
You can do that now. It's
but how long is the drive?
It's 3 hours and like 40 minutes.
See,
that's DC to New York.
Yeah, but who does that?
They've been doing it for years, for generations.
Who does that?
There are people who live in DC and work in New York.
Take a train for 3 hours?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day. That's a thing.
Every day? Oh, 3 hours on a train every day.
But I had a guy I met a while back who used to live in South Miami, and worked right here in downtown Fort Lauderdale. And he spent $2 and some change in traffic.
See,
driving.
I'll spend an hour from Fort Lauderdale to Miami, but I won't.
He was South Miami, like down by Perrine, by the zoo. He was
Okay.
way down. But he worked in Fort Lauderdale. He was renting. He said his average commute to me was, he said, I spend about 2 hours each way. So he would leave at like 6 to be here around 8 and get home around 7. He left around 5. And he ultimately ended up buying a house out west, like toward Fort Myers. And he still worked in Fort Lauderdale. It's like, well, I just cut across Alligator Alley. I'm still spending 2 hours in the car, but now I just spend it driving instead of sitting in traffic.
Right.
And I have a house on the canal with a front yard and a backyard and all that stuff. So and if you're on the Bright Line for 2 hours, that's productive time. I can work, I can call, and all types of other stuff. So I'm seeing that now. So the level of unaffordability in a lot of ways is not going to come down in South. So a lot of South Florida is gentrifying as a state. People are being pushed out.
Right. And there's no land.
There's no land. And when the land comes, it comes at such a high price that the only thing that you can build there is
expensive. Yeah.
So, and because the current governments, administrators have no interest in giving the proper incentives to be able to build something that people can own. That's the rub there a lot of times is
they'll build affordable housing, but they won't build it that you can afford to purchase it.
They'll build apartments and call apartments affordable housing.
Right.
And in my opinion,
which is smart as a business owner, but dumb for a community.
Because it doesn't help. It doesn't help ownership. It doesn't help property values. But I can build an apartment building, securitize it, and sell it to a pension fund for $200 million and get tax breaks on it. If I say for the first 5 years, we'll dedicate 20% of the building to affordable. That's exactly. I have the whole proposal. That's the whole other thing. But that's the business model. So, and then after the 5 years, then I can jack up the rents and then we can sell it to an insurance company, make a bunch of money. And that doesn't help the community. Nobody remembers. All the politicians are gone. Everybody who wants, like, that's the cycle. So until there are, which I don't think there are very many, until there are more people who are as passionate about making money and doing well. Like I call it doing well and doing good.
Okay.
So I can make a meaningful impact and I can make a whole bunch of money at the same time. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. I can help young people get into real estate. I can help, minorities get into luxury real estate and make more money than I could have ever imagined at the same time. I don't have to get into real estate and have this scarcity mentality and not share the wealth and not talk to anybody because I can't sell all the real estate if I wanted to.
Right.
That is true of most businesses. But in many cases, if not all cases, especially here in South Florida, maybe with the exception of 2 or 3, most of these buildings are built with investors. Investors don't care about making a meaningful impact on the community. They care about maximizing returns. So if you say, well, we could build this building and make a 30% return if we sold it as condos and we'd be able to keep the character and culture of the community and have all this goodwill, and that would be great. Or we could build it as an apartment building and we could make a 50% return. Okay.
They're going to take the 50% return.
All the time. And then they'll come up with these really creative ways to make the optics of it look like it's way more impactful than it did. Because people need somewhere to live and we're going to do some lower rents and all of that. And that's all great. But that doesn't help ownership in the community. And ownership is what
communities is what is being disbanded, I think, as a whole. I think this is just like
But it's structural. Like that's.
You think that's done on purpose?
I think it's in some cases it's done on purpose, but I don't think that it's important enough for people to not do. I've found that there are a lot of people, especially in real estate, there are a lot of things that are more important, and people have very creative ways to answer the gentrification, the displacement, the affordability issues that allow them to sound concerned, without compromising on what they came to do. Yeah, that's a very good point. So we're looking at ways to be able to make sure a percentage of this building is affordable. You know, we're going to set aside a couple of the retail spaces to make sure that local businesses can come in there and use. Like, they have all these canned answers to those things, but in many ways, those things aren't things that work long term. So keeping the local barbershop doesn't help the local barbershop if you don't keep the community around the local barbershop. Because if all his clientele gets displaced, then how does the barbershop stay? Keeping the local coffee shop doesn't help if you let a Starbucks come 2 blocks over. The dynamic doesn't work there. So,
but we all want Starbucks.
Yeah, no, we all want good coffee. It doesn't have to be Starbucks.
That's true.
So but that's the rub.
But then, so, well, I find I'm in a battle with, what's the word I'm looking for? It has to do with money. Our system, capitalism. I'm finding that there is a hard place between capitalism and trying to do right by communities.
I don't think it's capitalism. I think it's greed.
Oh,
like there's maximizing profits. There's a difference between saying I can take a little bit less and I can still make a bunch of money and make a meaningful impact, or I can maximize the amount of money I can make and completely disregard the effect on the community. And usually what happens is I'm going to make as much money as possible, and I'm only going to do the smallest amount as required by the government and the optics of the community to get by. Because I can take less, I can build luxury homes and spend a little bit more on marketing to make sure that people who live in the community know I'm selling the house, as well as people who live outside the community know. And that diversity in marketing translates to a diversity in sales. So I don't sell 50 houses to people from South America and nobody in the neighborhood bought anything. But if I sell 30 of those houses or 25 of those houses to people who live there and people from the Northeast, or because I diversify my marketing, I achieved both goals. We got some new homes. I made a bunch of money, but we kept the character and culture of the community. Hey, we want a new coffee shop. Great. So how about we see if we can get a Starbucks, or is there a local, like there's diversity here that can happen, but it requires you to not come in and say, we're going to maximize the amount of money. If your goal is to maximize your amount, that's why we're overfishing lakes. That's why we don't have any water. That's why they're arguing about water out west, because it's not about balance and let's do well and do good at the same time. It's about, we got to make as much money as possible. And if you question how much I'm making this money, then I'm going to give you a really creative, politically correct answer that still allows me to make money and doesn't demonize me in front of the cameras. And if me or anybody else raises our hand, then we get crucified as saying, oh, you don't want progress. You don't want these things. You don't want everybody wants Whole Foods in their community. Everybody wants fresh fruit. They don't want to live in a food desert, but people also don't want to get displaced. So what happens with a lot of those big box places, they come based on what they see coming. What they see coming down the east end of Sistro is what Whole Foods would like to see. Because they don't care about the people that live there now. They care about what's coming. But if you get a smaller local owned grocery store who cares about the character and culture of the community and understands the nuance and the diversity of there and all of the unique cultural dishes, would probably carry a little more stuff, some stuff from the Haitian diaspora, some stuff from the Cuban diaspora. You can probably get them over there for a much lower price, much smaller footprint, and they'd have a much more meaningful impact in the community, and they probably make way more money. But Whole Foods would take up twice as much space, pay way more for rent, and attract way more people from outside the community into the community. And when they drive that traffic, those people that start coming to the Whole Foods will be like, hey, we should buy something over here.
It's just good marketing.
Yeah. But it's good marketing targeting the wrong people. So you jumping over the locals to target people outside and saying, come here, without engaging the people that live there.
Yes, and then there's this is the thing I was saying, similar, or at least it's making me think of it, is that targeting poor people is a bad idea for business typically because they don't have the money to be able to spend. So if you target wealthier people, you're more likely to be able to get a sale.
Or if you work within an infrastructure that helps those poor people not be poor, and you sell things to them that add value to their life and aren't just random things to make them overspend on, and you curate the things in the community so they're not alcohol, fast food. So their contribution, things that contribute to that in layers. So you can address one piece of that, and that one piece doesn't necessarily fix everything else. But if the one piece that that tries to address that one thing, we're gonna put healthy food in this community. We're gonna start a community garden. Well, that community garden has to get its money from somewhere. And then wherever that money comes from, then the community garden starts to employ people. It employs people at a living wage. So now they're not poor people. So they're making more money, and they're making more money, which allows them to buy more stuff from the community garden and from other businesses in the community, which means the community garden gets bigger, which means it makes more money, which means it can hire other people, which means it can pay those people more, which means they have more money to spend in the community, which means now you get a coffee shop across the street from the community garden. So there's a cycle there, but you got to start with the community garden, or maybe it's a coffee shop, or it has to start. And a lot of times this gets into the banking stuff. The people who start those businesses don't have the financial wherewithal to sustain them, or they don't even have the financial wherewithal to start them, even though they know they're needed. And the people who do come in and have the financial wherewithal to start them, they completely overlook the people in the community as customers and say, no, we're going to get all these people from over here. I have heard more times than I'd like to admit. I've walked out of, I shouldn't say walk, I've left meetings when people continuously talk about how Sistrunk Boulevard could one day be the next Las Olas, because that's not a good thing. But they think it's a wonderful thing. And that,
man, I'm feeling like such an outsider on this one because I'm on that side beforehand. I mean, we're just starting to get into development and talking about it and seeing how things can go. And
but the balance there, that's it. Sistrunk used to be a thriving place in and of itself.
Did it?
It doesn't have to lose its character. Absolutely.
I have no idea because I wasn't here.
Yes, but I wasn't either. This predates me. But
okay.
The communities look the way they look. That's when we get into the crack epidemic and all of the war on drugs. There's all types of other stuff. So there's all types of outside forces that didn't happen here. So instead of trying to say, hey, we're going to take all of those people and bring them over here. Well, there are people here that are here already. Like you have places like Smitty's, and there are a couple other restaurants that have gotten some CRA grants that are opening up. There are people who are building meaningful things there, scaling those things. And that's not to say that, okay, we won't eventually get a Starbucks, or you don't eventually get a Whole Foods or whatever, because people want the amenities that come with gentrification. The problem isn't the amenities. The problem is the displacement. And being able to, that's a tough needle to thread a lot of times, because the people who have the capital to come build these things in the communities don't give very much value, unfortunately, to the community itself. They just see some dirt where they can build something, and then they have a machine that is a marketing machine that goes out and reaches all of their existing customers and says, hey, come over here. And they don't often understand how detrimental that is to the people that already live.
Yeah, and my thought was, well, I'd take the money that you, say I had a house, you gave me $200,000 for it. Maybe with development, it's worth 500 or $1 million. But then I take that 200,000 and build my dream home in Atlanta or someplace else.
Well, your assumption there is that how do you know your house is worth 200,000 and not 500?
Well, the internet is the only thing. But again, you said this.
Well, if you the internet, where do you know how you know where to look on the internet? There's all. If you're 80 years old and you don't have internet access, then what?
Oh man, you're making me feel real bad about this deal.
Well, no, but here's the thing though. It's not the development isn't the problem. It's the context of the development. So building a house and
Right, but
flipping it-
what I'm saying is that's more foresight that I wanted to think about when becoming an investor or a developer in the location. And that I see is where the rub that you were talking about is.
Or then you focus on Las Olas. You focus on Miami Shore. All of these issues are only issues in places that are facing gentrification. If you go to East Pompano, you don't have to worry about gentrification. Why? Because people flip houses over there all the time. There's no cultural issues. There's nobody being displaced. It's just, I'm going to buy this house and renovate it and put something else here.
It's because there's no...
If Victoria Park, if you go to Victoria, people are flipping houses left and right in Victoria Park.
Right.
No one's talking about gentrification in Victoria Park.
Didn't it used to be a predominantly black
It did.
area?
But today,
Right.
it's
No.
so that's jump the shark. The train has left the station. So we
It's
can go
too
back
late.
to that. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So, and in some of these areas, that's like flipping houses in Miami Beach. Nobody's in
saying-
Miami Beach talking about gentrification.
There's a historical presence as well as a historical cultural presence that needs to and should be maintained in Sistrunk
And-
as we're
And
talking.
there are people that are willing and able and trying to defend that in many cases. So in very crude terms, Sistrunk is fighting for his life. Victoria Park is dead.
Got it.
So it was very much a black community, but it's not anymore.
Okay.
So there are people, they don't know that. They've never known that. You can come over there and flip something and nobody's going to say anything to you about displacing it
Got it.
because we're past that.
We're way
It's
past it.
already gone.
Yeah.
So in those types of communities, if you go to Coral Ridge, if you go to communities that are stable, so most of those are white communities that they have good schools, they don't have any problems, they're not food deserts, they have all types of fresh food options and stuff like that. To go over there and make a bunch of money flipping houses, they don't care because the people that are moving in are probably look like the people that are moving out. There's no difference there. When you take that approach in somewhere like Sistrunk, somewhere like Opelika, somewhere like Overtown, somewhere like Richmond Heights, you're contributing to the transformation of the character and culture of a community largely in a negative way. That doesn't have to be the case. You can still buy the house and flip the house. You just have to be more intentional about how you market the house, about where you market the house, about how you price the house. Like there's a lot more that goes. So it's not impossible. It's still I was looking at houses in Sistrunk myself. I'd buy and hold probably more than I'd flip.
I want to buy and hold. I want to buy and develop, to be honest.
So there's tons of opportunity. It's just the context of, that's why I keep saying, it's not the act of flipping the house. It's knowing where you're flipping, what you're flipping, who you bought the house from to flip. Like those are things. I once heard a guy, I was at a meetup once and he said, older, I want to say, he said, I buy homes in these communities all the time. I send out hundreds of letters. And if you have a house that's worth $500,000 and I send you an offer for $200,000, I expect you to counter. I don't expect you to accept. But if you accept my offer, it's not my job to tell you that you should have countered at $425,000.
Right.
I'm just going to take the house.
Right.
And in his mind, because when he does that in Victoria Park, when he does it in Coral Ridge, when he does it in North Miami Beach, when he does it in Miami Shores, that's what he expects that to happen in Opelika, in Overtown, on Sistrunk. So when it doesn't happen, he's, oh man, I won the lottery, I can keep going. Not, man, I'm really leveraging the fact that this lady's grandkids who live in Atlanta just got a letter from me and they have no idea how much this is worth. Or this little old lady who lives in this house has never seen $200,000 before in her life. And she thinks because when she bought this house for $75,000 60 years ago, that 200 grand is a lot of money. None of those things are things to him. It's just, I'm making a deal. This
is the deal I'm trying to make right now. and now I'm rethinking it.
But it's just the context of it. It is not I once heard a guy say, it's not the job of the cashier at McDonald's to tell you that a Big Mac is bad for you. It's her job to sell you a Big Mac and ask you if you want some.
Right.
That's the way most investors look at real estate.
That's exactly how I was looking at the real estate.
And that's okay if you're not looking at a community that's already in danger of extinction.
Right.
And
I'm looking at Sistrunk.
Yeah. But that's why the context is so important. A lot of times, and this happens with people from these communities, they go, I'm living proof. If I wasn't cognizant of this because of the way I was raised and my family and all this other stuff, I've been trained to look for deals to just go get the money. And if I just do that, then I look at Sistrunk the same way, I have mentors that they would look at Sistrunk. Because it's a good deal. These are the numbers. Here's the ARV. Here's what the rehab cost will be. And we can flip that and do great. Yeah, but there's a whole lot more wrapped up into that if I know what's going on. So a lot of what happens in development has to do with who taught you how to develop, who taught you, what did they teach you to be cognizant of about the community? What's going on there? So it's not the development isn't the bad part. It's making sure that you can make a bunch of money in real estate really easily, but understanding sort of the lay of the land there to me is what's challenging, and what layers on top of that in places like Sistrunk. Then that's where the lack of diversity in real estate comes in. If you go build a $500,000 house and you can't find anyone from the community or with a connection to the community that knows how to market a $500,000 house, then you end up with someone that's got an office on Las Olas or that doesn't know anything other than you got a $500,000 house. And then she reaches out to her whole database, who are all people who live on Las Olas. And what do? They buy the $500,000 house and they rent it out. Or they buy the $500,000 house and they move in and they have no clue, about the Black History Parade or any of the stuff that goes on. So then they move in and they complain about the noise, about the parties. So there's a lot there, but I think, at least from a real estate perspective, management of gentrification doesn't mean don't buy in these communities. It means knowing where you're buying. And it's usually not I don't think there's a lot of adjusting to do on the buy side. I do think there's a little more that says, okay, man, it's worth 500. I can't give her 2. I got to do like 350 or something. Cause if I give, like, this is exploitation.
But what if I can't afford the 350? I can afford the 200.
Then that's the rub. So but I say this is that's the sort of the push and pull of, then you got to know who's your seller. Because if you're buying from someone, there's a difference between someone who has a $500,000 house or $500,000 property and they'll sell it to you for 200 because they need the money now.
He didn't need the money now,
yeah.
But he's an older dude for sure. Would like to get the hell out of here. Yeah. His place is flooded a couple times.
And if they know it, but the key is him knowing what he's selling. If he knows he's giving you a deal, then I don't think that there's a problem there.
I have no idea if he thinks it's a deal or not. Yeah.
And therein lies and that's where you as the buyer have this is what I can do this is what I can pay with a clear conscience and still accomplish my financial goals. Instead of I'm going to pay the lowest. And you understand what I'm saying?
I'm going to start a GoFundMe. I need $350,000, y'all. I'm going to help this dude out by giving him the amount that he needs. So really, I need an extra 150. So we can GoFundMe.
Yeah. But that's the what you're articulating is, and that happens inside the community and outside the community. But I don't think that people give that. That's the thought is, okay, well, what number do I need to get it at? Like, okay, what's the non-negotiable? If 200 is the number, that's the number. And if you can get the deal, then it is what it is.
Well, for me, I'm trying to be a part of the community, but I would live there for sure.
But then that's a completely different thing.
Right.
So now you're not talking about I'm going to flip
But it's still an investment, like, because I believe you should live every place that you invest in, so that way you can understand it,
and
in order to be able to.
But that means that it's the investment in the context that you're saying is more semantics, because you're buying it as a resident. I'm going to live here. So that means when you get ready to sell it, you know what you're selling.
Right.
That's the conversation you have with your with the agent you list it with. If it's not me, I just want to plug that. But with the agent hey, this is what I'm selling. This is what I want. I'm never selling. Or this is what I'm renting. This is what whenever you transition out of it and you're renting that property, you know the value, I use the character and culture. You know what's going on there. And in your time living there, you've done as much as you could within reason to contribute to that and not take away from that. So it's not just I'm going to show up and have a house here. We've all had neighbors like they just show up. You never talk to them. They don't wave at the mailbox. They just live here and they leave. In communities like that, that's how communities become communities. Is the opposite of is, hey, welcome to the neighborhood, man. How you doing? What are the amenities here?
Does that exist?
It does when you make it.
But where?
I have both of my neighbors. I know them. One of them I've had, and these are just the two people that live directly next door to me, right? I have a couple people in my community.
I am friends with my one neighbor, but the rest of them I don't know. But also I got involved during COVID, and that would have totally changed had COVID not existed. I would have tried to do that.
Exactly.
And that's why COVID existed.
Everything has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So part of coming to those communities, especially in places like Sistrum, there's always a chamber of commerce. Every Black community got at least one church, probably a half a dozen. There's community events, there's clubs. There are always ways, to get involved enough so that you understand what's going on. So it's even if you don't know your neighbors immediately, if you're out enough, it's the same way we can sense when somebody has malicious intent. It's the same way when you can only be at so many events until somebody says, man, what? You see what I'm saying? Like it just doesn't.
When I walk in the room.
Yeah. And you're a personable dude. You talk, you're engaged. You don't I'm just going to sit over here and watch everything.
Sometimes.
Well, every time I see you, you're like, but that is what creates community in those places. When I think about a college campus. Think about a freshman dorm. That's like a small neighborhood. Everybody moves in. Nobody knows each other. But after the first week, we all know each other. Why? Because proximity doesn't survive prejudice. I can't not know you. So, and that's forced because it's a closed community. But in the larger context of communities, that same thing can be true if you engage in the community. If you play ball, there's a basketball court. They just spent $1 billion damn near on their new YMCA on Sistrum. It's got an event.
We have
facility.
A YMCA?
Yes.
Okay.
Hilarious.
Cool. And how much was it?
Oh man, I want to say it's like, no, it's state of the art.
Wow.
You have not seen the Y?
No.
You go spend,
I love the Y.
Right.
I grew up in the Y.
You can't miss it. They
I went
got
to
a
summer.
pool, they got
Okay.
entertainment, they got a rooftop deck, they got an event facility, have a theater, they have comedy shows. It's that's hilarious.
Yo. Okay.
But stuff like
I'm not involved in my community enough.
yes, you got to get to the Y. They got basketball courts, weight room. Like it's a state of the art facility, and I'm not exaggerating. It's they spent a bunch of money on it. But those types of places are the places that you meet. You meet the people who are trying to be engaged, right? That's as with any community. There's always going to be people who are just assholes. But there are people who are welcoming and like, hey, if you want to be a part of this, I'm happy to give you the tour and tell you this is what we're doing. How can we work together? That exists.
Okay.
And the only way that I've found to break into that is proximity. I've seen the reverse of that as as a minority. I show up and nobody wants to talk to me. So I've always just tried to make it my business, or been blessed to make friends or meet people really high on the food chain. So when I know those people and I see them, well, when I see them at events, then all the people who are low on the food chain, like, why is he talking to the black guy? And then everybody, I don't go to places and have to work the room. The room works me because I'm the only person there. And you don't know whether is he connected, or is he really smart, or is he working? Is he the help? And they don't know. And the only way to find out is to come and talk to you. So same thing. If you're at an event and that holds true for any minority, not just black people.
It works for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're the only of anything in a room,
Oh,
hey, now let's see what that is.
that is like my favorite thing to do, is to be the token white boy.
Yeah.
And because it does exactly that. Instead of me having to work the room works
you.
me.
Yep. And that I've gotten incredible. I met amazing people like that. It's very, a lot of times it's very easy to see people who's jaded and who's not. And I think it's while it can be incredibly lonely, especially in luxury real estate, because it's just seems perpetual sometimes. It can be very, very valuable, people give you time when they're genuine about sort of, man, I really want to know, how the hell did you get here? Like we used to have a sales center.
This is the question that was supposed to start this podcast.
Yeah, I used to get, we had a sales center in Aventura Mall, and I would work do floor duty there. And at least once a month, an older black couple would stop at, I've been walking past this sales kiosk for years and I've never seen anybody black here. Can I have a business card? I don't want to buy any real estate. I'm just glad to see somebody that looks like me standing. So being in those spaces, that's when visibility matters. You know what? Part of my goal is to increase the visibility and viability of African-American agents in the luxury space. A lot of times we do a very good job of the viability piece. I know a bunch of agents that are really good at what they do. So their resume, you're an incredibly viable photographer. So your work speaks for itself. But if you're not visible, your viability doesn't matter very much because nobody knows you exist.
Yeah.
So when I get the opportunity and you say, well, who are you? And I say, oh, well, I've done $500 million in the last 5 years. Oh, shit. Well, maybe you're worth me talking to. So a lot of time, and you see this a lot in minority, especially in older minority culture, where we get taught to work really hard and keep your head down and don't make any noise, don't ruffle any feathers, and just be quiet and have your little piece of the world over here and nobody knows who you are. And that to me doesn't benefit it. You know, I can't go around telling people that God is amazing and if you pray and work hard and you'll achieve all your dreams, and I don't tell y'all how wonderful I'm doing. God is good and I'm out here spending millions of dollars to be proof of it. That's the point. And how can other people have faith if you're not an example of what the faith gets them? So that visibility piece is very, very powerful. And being in, at least starting in environments where you're the only one of whatever your specific genre is, or whatever, that helps both sides of that. That helps people who genuinely want to see more of you somewhere say, well, how can we get more people like Chris? Where are you hanging out? How did you find about this? And so they then know that you exist. It's out here. You then know they exist. And both of you go back to your respective villages and spread that message. That's sort of where it starts. And it can seem like you're just trying to suck the ocean with an eyedropper because it's very tedious and lonely, and you're going to always run into people who make it difficult and say messed up things. But knowing that that's where you're supposed to be, I'm going to do my part. I know what I'm supposed to do, and that's all I can do. And focusing on that slice of, because if you think about all of it, the enormity, it's too much. You'll just, some days I wake up and I think about the lack of diversity in luxury real estate. I'm incredibly inspired, man. We're going to change the game and we're going to start killing it on this. And other days I wake up and I'm like, this is completely overwhelming. What the hell am I doing? But both days I get up, I put my shoes on and I go sell some real estate. And I usually have more good days than bad.
I'm going to ask the question. Who are you? What do you do? And where do you do it? And I'll put this at the front.
And then we'll just go everywhere.
And then I'll let it just
My name's
do
Nate. I
like
just go around starting shit. So,
and then where can they find you? And like you said earlier, why should they listen to you?
gotcha.
Because a lot of things about you I did not know until today.
We gotta go to dinner, man. Have some drinks or something.
Yes, we're definitely down. We're gonna do this. But I want other people to know who you are. I want all 35 people who are gonna watch this to know, maybe 60.
My mom sees it, it's gonna go viral.
Where they can find you, who you are on Instagram,
Yep.
social media, your plug, how they can find you if they want to do business with you, if they're looking for a mentor, how they should reach out to you, and I think you get the idea.
Yes. So, my name is Nathaniel Crawford. I am the broker founder of Black Luxury Realty. I have been selling real estate for a little over a decade. I grew up between South Miami, Southwest Atlanta. I sell luxury real estate, specifically new and pre-construction. I am passionate about increasing diversity in the luxury real estate space. And I do that because I know where I came from and where I'm going. And I want to take as many people with me there as possible, and to be living proof that you can do that and still do well. You can do well at the same time. If you want to find me, I am on Instagram at They Call Me Mr. Crawford. That's They Call Me Mr. Crawford. The website is blackluxuryrealty.com. You can send me a DM on Instagram. I mentor agents all the time. Even when I talk to agents, even if you don't come to my brokerage, because I got a pretty particular criteria for that, I'm still open to talk to anybody, to give them advice about selling luxury real estate. Mentor agents all the time. So that's it. I'm passionate about being a living example, man. You can get out here and make it. Always pray like it's all up to God, work like it's all up to you. It all works out somewhere in the middle.
Hell yeah. I want to keep going, but it's
I got you.
10:30.
Oh, I got time, man.
I don't. I got to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning.
I got to take my mom to the airport at 3:30. So
Ooh. I would love to absolutely have you back again. We could absolutely do dinner, so
Cool.
it's not on this. I will probably take the last part that you just said, summarize it, and then put that as an intro to this. And then yeah, man.
I
Awesome.
appreciate the invite, man.
Thank you
This
so
is
much
dope.
for coming through. And if there's any need for you to do this with somebody else, I'm happy to record it for you.
Cool. I am actually in the middle of, I just changed offices. So my office used to be right on Las Olas, above where Del Frisco's is.
Mhm.
I just left there and I got a larger space over off of Oakland Park Boulevard. And I am in the middle of setting up my podcast studio.
Hell yeah.
So I got a backdrop and all types of other stuff. I got my mics, my Roadcasters. I got a Roadcaster Pro mixer.
These things just became obsolete. I don't know if you know
Really?
that. Oh yeah.
I love mine.
I mean,
It's
no,
great.
they're great, but like as far as like the need for a great microphone, it's
Yeah. Well, it's for my ears.
yeah. Well, with the new AI, so basically it takes any audio
And it'll crisp it up.
and
yeah.
it'll. It's so crazy.
Yeah, I've seen some of the little mics, all that stuff. Background noise.
Yeah, dude, like crazy,
Yeah.
crazy. Thank you, Nate.
Thank you for having me, sir. Thank you for having me. This was really dope.